Hey, good evening, residents of Litchfield, and welcome to the September 2nd, 2020 school board meeting. I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this evening, we start off with a public hearing, RSA 197:3-A3. The governing body warrants shall specify in one or more articles the amounts of appropriations proposed for a reduction, recession, or increase from the operating budget, or separate warrant articles are both adopted at the annual meeting. RSA 197:3-A, special meeting for change in educating funding. In response to statutory changes resulting in reductions or increase in distribution of state revenues for education pursuant to RSA 198:41, the school districts which would take effect after the adoption of the new school district budget and would apply in the fiscal year covered by the new budget. The governing body of a school district may, after consideration with the budget committee, call a special meeting of the legislative body to consider a reduction, recession, or increase of the appropriations made at an annual meeting. And this will bring us to the superintendent.
Thank you. So I just want to walk everybody through the process and what we're proposing and why we're making the proposal. So essentially, we are having the public hearing tonight, and we're planning on a school district special meeting and vote taking place on Wednesday, September 16th. That'll be at 6 o'clock in the gymnasium of Campbell High School. And just before we get into it, it's a different sort of meeting for the town of Litchfield. This is not a ballot vote. This is a hand count vote. So it's a one question warrant article. Whoever shows up, they'll be all in favor, all opposed. We'll count hands, and that's how we'll determine whether the public wants to do what we're asking with the funds. So mark your calendars if you want to participate for Wednesday, September 16th. So why are we having a special election? Basically, in the last budget that was developed by the state, there was an allocation of $62.5 million that went to targeted New Hampshire school districts. And they called it fiscal disparity aid. But there was a lot of conversation about that money being earmarked toward one-time expenses that districts needed in order to continue to operate successfully. In Litchfield's case, we made out pretty well. The allocation is about $667,000, which is a nice additional amount of money coming our way. But we have to remember, these are one-time funds and one-time funds only. So they're arriving in this fiscal year, and there's no guarantee that they will be renewed in the future. So we really want to find a way to be smart about taking that money in and then putting it in a place that will allow us to benefit from it for a few years and get some projects accomplished. That's our goal. So we did not include those funds in the budget that was approved back in March. And because we did not appropriate them at that time, we now need to have a special meeting in order to put those into the newly approved School District Capital Improvement Expendable Trust Fund. And so that is a way that we can park the money and use it toward our infrastructure, which is what the original intent of the money was. So this will allow us to put it into that fund. And RSA 197.3A requires that we have a special meeting in order to allocate that change in funding. So that's what we are proposing to do. So the RSA is cited here. I won't read it to everybody, but basically it does talk about the ability for the school board to first have a consultation with the budget committee in town. And I believe we did that at the last budget committee meeting. So last Thursday, Member Myers was representing the school board. I jumped in at one point. So we've had the consultation with the budget committee. The budget committee doesn't vote on it per se. They're not going to have a stake in it other than the involvement of knowing what we're doing and why we're doing it and the opportunity to discuss it publicly. So if anybody wants to go back and watch last Thursday's budget meeting, you would see that conversation take place. So the question that's being presented is, shall the school district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $667,000 to the Capital Improvement Expendable Trust Fund previously established on March 10th of 2020? This sum to be offset by a one-time grant of fiscal disparity funds in the amount of up to $667,000 as part of the state of New Hampshire's adequacy aid to the district. No amount to be raised by additional taxation. I think that's a really important item, is that we're not asking the taxpayers to increase the tax rate this year. This is revenue coming from the state, and we're just asking to place it into the expendable trust fund. So what would we propose to do with the money? Here we have sample projects that are ongoing and proposed for the future. And part of it is I'm trying to provide a scope and a scale as to what items cost. So you can see that currently we have a lot of ventilation projects going on in our schools with concerns that have come forward relative to the spread of the virus in the buildings. We've really honed in on examining our ventilation systems and then making repairs that need to be made. And we're estimating that we will have spent by the end of September about $125,000 studying the systems, repairing the systems, updating the systems as needed. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Because if you look at the next column for future projects, in order to update the systems completely, the projected cost is $2.65 million. So it's really a rather costly adventure for us to get into with the ventilation systems. The system at LMS has been noted as beyond useful life. It's now 35 plus years old. And, it's really reached the point that it has to be completely updated because it just is not able to function automatically. It will function manually. So we have people that are trained to run around and open and close things by hand. There's a great picture that we were given of a valve with a pair of vice grips that they just leave on the valve because they know rather than try to find the vice grips, you're gonna have to open and close it. So just clamp them on and leave them there so that you can turn it open and closed. But that's not the way to operate a school. And so that's why a $2.65 million project is needed in order to get that updated completely. The LMS canopy project, that's actually, the cost is closer to $320,000, maybe $330,000. But remember, we have $100,000 in grant money that came from the state to assist with that. We'll talk later in the meeting about that canopy project and how we're progressing on it. But again, it gives you a sense of there's one security project that is going to secure that school, and it's a $220,000 price tag. And then we have the GMS electrical repair. So if you remember, the tree dropped on the line across from the old fire station, power surge goes through the network, and our school goes down. And it cost us, all said and done, about $60,000 to repair one device in that school. It could have, if that device had failed, it could have triggered an even worse reaction throughout the building. So the point is that when you have a building that was begun in 1930 and has been added on to every 10, 20 years since, it really is an aging infrastructure. And so it gives you a sense of the type of ongoing costs that we face that are just unanticipated. Also for future projects, and a key thing for us is planning what to do with GMS. And so we're estimating about $320,000 just in planning costs to determine what we're going to do, if we're going to build a new school, et cetera. So there are expenses that go with that. And if the state can help us with those, that would be great. The LMS Kitchen, which is woefully undersized, needs to be expanded in order to make sure that we can serve the lunch program that we want to serve, and a $300,000 expense is allocated there. And then finally, the bleachers at the high school. And again, people view the high school as the new school, but the new school is 20 years old. And when those bleachers go in and out multiple times throughout the year, they do warp and get bent and no longer function as originally designed. So that's a $206,000 replacement in order to get the bleachers updated and make sure that they are safe for another 20 years. So these are all the types of things that we're facing, that having the $667,000 in the Capital Improvement Trust Fund will avoid us having to increase taxes for taxpayers by having the money that's coming from the state to help out.
Can I ask a question, Mike? How much do we have in the Capital Reserve Fund for emergency repairs and things like that?
I can verify it. I think we're in about the $350,000 range.
Okay. Have we used any of that to address the HVAC or the
We have not
repairs?
drawn down at this point.
Okay.
The drawdowns from that would be based on a reimbursement basis. And I think we identify
okay.
if we can do things through our budget, we will. But if there's a need for those funds, we'll bring that forward to the board to request. So we can request it from the trustees.
Okay.
And that's similar to what happened with the collapse of the drainage pipe at LMS. So if you remember there, that washed out on us and we had to replace it, and it cost $35,000.
I think it was 35 to 30, I want to say 38 actually.
And we had asked the board, at this time, we're going to try to get that out of the budget through other cost savings and cost avoidance, but we always could have dipped into that fund.
Okay.
So fortunately, we've gotten lucky that we've had one thing like that occur. I really am nervous when we start the school year with a $60,000 unanticipated bill for an essential thing like electricity, that, it's like we've already kind of spent a lot of money right out of the gate. So this might be the year that dipping into those funds is what we have to do.
And
There-
barring that, the 666.67 would go towards our future capital improvements, right? That would be.
Yeah, that would go into the newly established fund. That
And only for
was
those
voted in March.
things.
Yeah, for things that are identified in the capital planning.
The other thing is if we look at those ventilation repairs, and we've been getting after ventilation it's been on the radar for a year. Our intent was to get into that this year anyway. But again, that's money that we didn't necessarily budget. So we're going to have to find that somewhere. And having this money available will be critical to helping us do that. So we've been asked the question, if the warrant article passes as proposed, in other words, everybody who turns out raises their hand and says yes to it, then that money goes into the fund. And again, these are critical repairs, critical upgrades, and critical building projects. I mean, these are not fluffy things, electricity and so forth. I mean, these are things that we really need to make sure that we have. If the warrant article does not pass, if the majority of people who show up that night vote no, then that one-time revenue will still arrive, but it won't be appropriated in the budget, and therefore it will just go into the general fund and will result in an unassigned fund balance next year. And of course, that unassigned fund balance would then be used to offset taxes. So a little bit of background information. Our state representatives, Ralph and Rich, when we were at the March meeting, if you remember, we really informed the public during the budget adoption that these were one-time funds and that they were intended to support infrastructure projects. So we made it clear that, this was money that was coming and that we needed to make sure that we had it available for those projects. And then it's important to note that because of COVID-19 savings last spring, and the board made a commitment to the taxpayers because they had basically approved the budget with cost items in it, excuse me, that resulted in a tax increase for the year coming up. But we felt it was important for us to tighten our belt and try to deliver try to deliver a larger than normal unassigned fund balance at the end of the year so that we could return that to the taxpayers and offset the costs that they had already approved. Excuse me. So the $700,000 basically has neutralized any cost increase coming into this year. So that's really important for the voters to understand, because if we don't allocate this additional $667,000 into the amount, and that does go back to offset taxes, it's going to cause a large and artificial dip, a one-time dip in the tax rate. And then the very next thing that happens the year after is you have to make up that revenue because it's not there. And then if there are other increases that are on in the budget, it will automatically spike. So it's like there'll be the initial spike to recover for the funds, and then a secondary spike to cover, say, a collective bargaining agreement or whatever has come along. So really, really important that people understand. If you look at this and say, well, if we take that other $667,000, you're just shy of a $1.4 million return to the taxpayers. But there'll be a price to pay down the road because it'll dip and then it'll spike and then spike. And so I think people just have to think through this and realize that we've already helped the taxpayers out, and now we're hoping that we can park the money in order to get after the projects that we need to do in our schools. And I put in here that the board has recommended a yes vote on this article, although I don't know if we've actually formally voted on that as I say that. So I think in our preliminary conversation, it was sort of the go ahead, but I do think we need to make sure that, since I wrote that, we probably ought to make sure that that's the case.
The board needs to sign the warrant anyway, so that would be a confirmation, I think.
There you go.
The other piece of it too, Mike, when you're talking about the dip and then the spike, is that there would be a spike to get back up to the regular revenue, but then those repairs and upgrades aren't going away.
Right.
If we don't, they will be added as warrant articles likely in the following years.
And again, we'll get into some more of the details. I mean, Corey and I have sat in on multiple meetings with ventilation engineers and understanding our system. And, I can just tell you what we're uncovering at the high school, for example. And again, the new school, right? So it should have the most up-to-date system, but that is 20 years old. And it seems as if it was never really balanced and maintained properly from the beginning. And so as a part has failed here and a part has failed there, it's just sort of caused the whole operation to become sluggish. And honestly, it's costing us money in energy costs because we are overheating and overcooling spaces because it's not functioning correctly, because valves aren't opening and closing as they should be. And so it's resulting in additional costs because we haven't maintained it correctly. So now that we have a plan, we have a firm on hand, we have a contract in place to get after it, we're going to result in some long-term savings just by having it properly functioning and being maintained. So again, it's really key that we have this money in order to be able to get everything up to where it needs to be. So the meeting is on Wednesday, the 16th in the high school gym. All registered voters in Litchfield are able to vote. It is a hand vote. It's who shows up that day. There can't be an absentee ballot because it is possible that somebody could amend the warrant article on the floor. And so it's important that people know that turning out is important. And we have a regular board meeting that night. I think we're coming back here to town hall afterwards. Yeah. So I just have a reminder to everybody that masks are required on school grounds. So anybody coming from the public to participate needs to wear a mask in order to come into the gym and to participate in the meeting.
So before we go into board comments and also voting on the warrant article, I just wanted to, for the public, I apologize for not giving out earlier, the phone number, if there's someone has comment and would like to call in, the number is 1-866-899-4679, and the access code is 292-443-637. Again, the phone number to call in for this meeting and then for this public hearing, then also for our meeting afterwards, is 1-866-899-4679, and the access code is 292-443-637. Does this board have any comments on the warrant? Of course, I'm not connected. So just bear with me. I'm trying to connect to the internet.
Yeah, mine keeps fritzing out too.
There it is. So again, the warrant article that we'll vote on right now to approve, not approve, but to put to the public is Article 1. Shall the Litchfield School District will vote? Shall the Litchfield School District will vote to raise?
No, take out the word will.
Thank you.
Yep.
Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $667,000 to the Capital Improvement Expandable Trust Fund previously established on March 10, 2020. The sum to be offset by a one-time grant of fiscal disparity funds in the amount of $667,000 as part of the State of New Hampshire adequacy aid to the district. No amount to be raised by additional taxation. So, is there a motion to accept the article?
Motion to recommend.
Yes.
The war Article 1 is written.
Is there a second?
A second.
Tina made the motion and Liz second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor to recommend signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. So we'll go around. Tina,
Aye, yes.
Tara,
Aye.
Liz,
Aye.
Rob. Aye. Brian's an aye. So the motion carries 5-0-0. Just give it a moment in case the community has anything to comment on. Do we have anyone in the line, Jason? No? Well, with no one on the line and no one in our public, then that'll close the public hearing and bring us to the public session. We've already had our Pledge of Allegiance, so do we have any revisions to the agenda?
We do not.
I do. I'm sorry.
Summary of non-public actions from August 19, 2020. Mr. Burke made a motion to approve the non-public minutes of July 30th. Ms. McDonald, second. The motion carried by roll call vote. Mr. Burke, yes. Mrs. Harrison, yes. Ms. McDonald, yes. Mr. Myers, yes. And Mrs. Hirschberger, yes. Mr. Burke made a motion to approve the non-public minutes of August 6th, 2020. Mrs. McDonald, second. The motion carried by roll call vote. Mr. Burke, yes. Mrs. Harrison, yes. Mrs. McDonald, yes. Mr. Myers, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger, yes. Mr. Myers made a motion to accept the nomination of Taylor Teokis as a grade 2 teacher at GMS at a salary of $46,369 for the 2020-2021 year. Ms. McDonald, second. Motion carried by roll call vote. Mr. Burke, yes. Mrs. Harrison, yes. Mrs. McDonald, yes. Mr. Myers, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger made a motion to accept the resignation of John Bennett, CHS special education teacher. Mrs. McDonald, second. Motion carried by roll call vote. Mr. Burke, yes. Mrs. Harrison, yes. Mrs. McDonald, yes. Mr. Myers, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger made a motion to accept the resignation of Tammy Roby, GMS part-time computer teacher. Mrs. Harrison, second. Motion carried by roll call vote. Mr. Burke, yes. Mrs. Harrison, yes. Mrs. McDonald, yes. Mr. Myers, yes. Mrs. Hirschberger, yes. And that was it for non-public. We have no presentation recognitions, so that'll bring us to, shouldn't miss anything here, correspondence.
Let's see. Did the board receive correspondence from Stacy LaMountain today?
Yes.
Was that the only one that the board received? Because I have other public.
I never
input.
got that from her,
You didn't get it? Okay.
unless you forwarded it.
I did.
Yeah, I didn't get it from her.
Okay.
Right, I got it from you too.
Yeah, she addressed it as public correspondence, so I wanted to make sure that the board saw that. I have things labeled public input and also correspondence. So I guess I'll just get to it and read them all. Let's see. Trixie Gardner sent in a letter to the board. She was the first correspondence that we received, but she's further down on the agenda for 7:30 during community forum. So I'm going to push that one till later.
You gotta read it, Tina, because if someone does call in to speak of it, then people know what we're talking about.
I should read it now?
Sure.
Okay.
I invited that if someone wanted to chime in during community input, they could do so.
Okay. So this was a letter from Trixie Gardner, the Gardner family, with 22 other families listed. Actually 23, because I got another email that said, please add me to that list. So I will, let's see, this is from Trixie and Derek Gardner, 66 Cook Ave. Andrew and Erica Ruggles, 54 Century Lane. Danielle and Brian Morgan, 5 Grouse Lane. Kevin and Janine Ankle, 43 Tanager Way. Meg Kuchar, 12 Birch Street. Kathleen Doucette, 115 Talent Road. Nicole Quintana, 21 Riverview Circle. Ed and Margaret Almeida, 10 Hopkins Street. Jessica Vaughn Martin, 19 Martin Lane. Jennifer and Jeff Diener, 9 Birch Street. Deb and Jeff Hidalgo, 25 Brenton Street. Candace and Jason Steves, 20 Chasebrook Circle. Samantha McClellan, 31 Chasebrook Circle. Brooke Gray, 22 Brook Road. Bethany Wexler, 5 Tamarack Lane. Heidi Ames, 21 Moose Hollow Road. Meg and Zach Fowler, 1 High Plain Ave. Wendy Saracen and Austin Trombley, 2 Darlene Lane. Bryant and Catherine Morris, 23 Moose Hollow. Stacy LaMountain, 5 Hildreth Drive. Andrew and Kate Stevens, 9 Evergreen Circle. Tanya Watkins, 531 Charles Bancroft Highway. And let's see. And then it was Kelly Marie and Scott Sicard of 10 Brandy Circle in Litchfield who would like their name added to the letter. And the letter reads, sorry, it's loading. Having the same trouble with connection.
Want my computer?
My connection just keeps going in and out. Let me see if I can reconnect. Sorry.
Thought I had it, but I can't file this.
Here it is. Got it. Dear Dr. Jetty and school board members, we are writing this letter in opposition of the full remote model as it pertains to the remote learners not having their own dedicated teacher. We feel strongly that this decision creates an educational gap between your full-in students and the full remote students. We request acknowledgement of this letter and an improved full remote plan that takes action on the governor's recommendation to assign an educator to exclusively focus on remote learners. The current full remote model creates an educational gap and presents many concerns, especially for our elementary students. First, young children will have a very hard time following a live stream class due to the background noise and movement in the classroom, much like those adults who live streamed into the school board meetings and oversight task committee meetings. Not only is there the most potential for background noise and distractions at the elementary level, but they are also the least equipped to be able to follow it. Second, teachers who are tasked with supporting both in-school students and remote students will inevitably have to prioritize the in-school students in order to keep them safe and engaged, leaving the remote kids as an afterthought. Third, the elementary students are not one-to-one, meaning they will not be doing daily digital assignments in school due to lack of available technology. This will force teachers to do both in-person assignments, preparations for hands-on activities, and create digital resources and assignments for the remote kids. When will they have time to do this? Additionally, the younger students have not yet learned the skills necessary to navigate independently through Google resources and other online platforms. They will require adult support and will have many tech support questions. The teacher likely will not have the time to answer these questions since she will simultaneously be keeping the in-school kids safe and engaged. Lastly, younger children require adult support to log into the live stream. It is unreasonable to expect these families, many trying to work from home or manage younger children, to be on a schedule for many live meets in a day. Some of the children will be with grandparents or other caretakers and not able to get parent help until later in the day. In addition, the current full remote model furthers the educational gap for our students with disabilities by the lack of adequate learning opportunities. If a local education agency, LEA, continues to provide educational opportunities to the general student population during a school closure, the school must ensure that students with disabilities also have equal access to the same opportunities, including the provision of FAPE. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, states, students with IEPs and 504s are entitled to an education in a least restrictive environment, even remotely. This includes having a dedicated teacher for remote students who can focus on an integrated remote classroom. At the last school board meeting on August 19th, you mentioned 3 points to dispute why a teacher cannot be assigned to teach all of the full remote students in a particular grade. Number one, there are no remote teachers. Litchfield does not have remote teachers. The reopening plan states teachers will be teaching simultaneously in person and the remote population. So the district does in fact have remote teachers. These remote teachers are also in-person teachers, a model that is unsustainable long-term. We are asking you to assign a dedicated teacher to the full remote students to provide equal access to education. Our students need the attention of a dedicated remote teacher to succeed, not a teacher who is managing 2 classroom environments and student needs. Additionally, we agree with the LEA that the implementation of a blended synchronous model requiring teachers and paras to perform double duty is impractical for teachers and paras and will be counterproductive without the support of those responsible for implementing it. Further, not only is this mode of instruction not a best practice for educators, but the NHDOE and the governor strongly advised against it due to its unwieldy nature. Number 2, full-in numbers. You need all teachers on hand to spread out your full-in students in the building. This will minimize the effort of each teacher instructing in a remote model. The strategy to have all teachers in the building for your full-in students neglects the needs of 20% of your student population. Remote learners need and deserve the same level of engagement, interaction, support, and reinforcement as the full-in students. These students are already socially isolated from the students in school. They need to feel a sense of community. Take a moment to put yourself in the shoes of our students. Imagine logging into class to see their peers together, interacting and engaging with the teacher, increasing that outsider feeling. Our students' emotional well-being should be of utmost importance. Creating a remote classroom with other students who are in the same learning environment creates equity and brings these students' families and their teacher together. While we understand the need to keep numbers down for in-person learning, we believe there are other creative ways in achieving this while dedicating a remote teacher to remote learners. For example, at the elementary level, utilizing the 4 reading tutors, math tutor, and enrichment tutors since they are certified. During a pandemic, we need all hands on deck, and many districts have tapped into these resources as a way to keep cohort numbers low. We should not be sacrificing the needs of one student cohort, remote learners, in order to meet the needs of the larger cohort, the full-in learners. 3, full-in student absence to include non-COVID illness. You need students to stay within their assigned class to provide accessible education for when they're sick. Providing live stream access to students who are staying home for non-COVID illness is a new procedure for the Litchfield School District. This new opportunity benefits the full-in students only. Theoretically, since you have mentioned in previous meetings that all of Litchfield will likely become remote at one point this year, all teachers and staff will be trained and prepared to go remote. If a student becomes ill and needs to be home, they should be able to log into their particular classroom teacher during their absence, not toggle to a remote classroom. This potential temporary need to have remote access is not a sufficient justification for decreasing the quality of educational experience for the long-term remote learners. If it is decided that kids out on absences should live stream into their class, doing so would be no different than what you are already asking of teachers, except that it would be for short-term situations rather than all-year daily live streaming you're currently asking of teachers. So while we feel it would be asking too much of teachers to live stream in the absent children, it seems preferable since it would be temporary and short-term. We feel it would be more beneficial to let the remote kids stay in their cohort and develop community with quality interactions, while the in-person kids can stay in their cohort by making up missed work on their own, or if necessary, live stream into their class until they're able to return. We ask the SAU 27 and school board to reconsider the current plan by implementing the governor's recommendation of assigning 1 or more educators to focus exclusively on remote instruction to support students in the district. It's important to note that the Litchfield reopening plan was created to ensure all students are successful learners. Our Litchfield remote learners deserve a quality education, and this should not be compromised in order to provide resources to support the full-in model. We are seeking a dedicated teacher to support the full remote student and the reevaluation of the reopening plan in order to truly achieve these needs. And it's signed by all of the people that I mentioned at the beginning. Let's see. I also have an email from Lindsay Forhart. Do you have that one, Michelle?
I do.
It says, hello, my husband and I are most concerned about the audio-visual component for the remote learners. I assumed when the board discussed how they would support remote learners, they were going to invest in high-def cameras and external audio mics that would allow our remote students to be actively engaged during lessons. I feel bad for the teachers who are expected to live stream from their small laptops. It is very difficult to have a laptop in the room and angle it appropriately so the person at home is able to see and hear well. Another level of concern is not being able to clearly hear the teachers speak through their masks while attempting to be heard through the microphone on their laptops. I don't want the students at home and the teachers in the classroom to be frustrated with getting the tech piece right to work appropriately when they will have so much more to manage. Thank you, Lindsay Forhart. And Stacy Lamountain. My name is Stacy Lamountain and I'm at 5 Hildreth Drive. My child is one of the 3 remote students in his kindergarten class. His teacher is expected to simultaneously teach the students in the room and the remote students. Not only do I find this to be a poor learning environment for the children, but a tiresome burden for the teachers as well. Number 1, the technology for the teacher to do this seamlessly is what? Only her personal laptop. So she's expected to teach the students in class and carry around a laptop near her face, which is already going to be covered by a mask. A microphone and a simple camera would perhaps be something that could have been considered months ago for teachers to live stream their classes somewhat effectively. Number 2, not all students have access to electronic devices to watch their teachers on Google Meet. If I'm working from home on my computer, how is my son going to be logging in on the same computer 3 times a day for attendance and watch the lessons? Chromebooks? The last I heard, those were on super back order. Number 3, timeliness of information. Practical dry runs have been lacking. I applaud the folks who are working tirelessly to try to build the plane while flying it. However, why did we not give teachers ample time to rearrange the rooms, order and install appropriate air filters, plan for the remote learners, and have dry runs, practice days of using the new technology to see how things would work in real time? A week of teachers and admins being able to run through these days, practice teaching in a new simultaneous style while having the other teachers and admins pretend to be students would have likely given real-time constructive feedback on what works and what doesn't work, rather than using precious teaching time with our children to learn these things. Number 4, I know there are only 20% of students currently going remote, and therefore they are either less important than the other 80, or we're just feeling that way. Collectively, a group of parents have sent a letter to have a better action plan for remote learners put on the next board meeting agenda. This request was denied because the board is convinced it has taken positive action to deliver a quality education to all students. However, the board does not intend to have dedicated remote teachers. Other schools such as Nashua, Charlotte Ave are doing this. Therefore, the quality of the education will, in fact, be missing. This is going to force us to choose to have poor quality, not from the teachers, but from the technology and lack of training, or to pull our children to find educational opportunities elsewhere. When most of us remove our kids from Litchfield remote learning as the waitlist for VLAX opens up, will the board finally then be convinced that they did not take enough positive action to deliver quality to our children? Thank you. Let's see. I have one from Candace Steves. She says, I have a remote student at GMS and an in-person student at LMS. I firmly believe that not giving remote students their own teacher is completely unfair to both the students and teachers. They deserve better. It seems as though the welfare of our children in both places is not of great importance at all. From the lack of proper hand washing stations to sending back kids into buildings without the proper ventilation in place, bus routes, not providing cameras and microphones for classes, and even plans for the year. It's completely unfair to the children in this community. All our children deserve and are entitled to a quality education and a safe environment, and the district is not living up to this in so many ways. It's so disappointing. That was Candace Steves. She sent that one to you too.
That one I got, but
Okay.
the one right before that I didn't.
Okay. I'll just send them all as a batch.
Okay.
Erica Ruggles wrote, Dear members of the school board, my husband and I enjoyed meeting with our son's first grade teacher yesterday during the remote day. One major concern we have is that it seems as though she's expected to use her laptop for synchronous learning. If a dedicated remote teacher is not an option, then our teachers and remote learners deserve a better setup. Is there a plan in place to order external audio microphones or high-definition cameras that would be more conducive for live streaming? I believe this was discussed at one of the last oversight committee meetings, so I wanted to follow up on this. Truthfully, I had assumed that microphones and other equipment would have been purchased at this point to support the remote learners and to help the teachers make live streaming as seamless as possible from the start. I keep hearing that the school board supports all students, but sadly, I'm not convinced. While I understand the majority of students are in person, the remote learners deserve the same quality education and resources as the in-person students. Without the proper technology in place, I feel they will be at a major disadvantage. My hope is that you'll make this a priority and will take positive action toward providing each classroom the necessary resources to make remote learning experience the best it can be for these children. Thank you for your consideration, Erica Ruggles. And that's what I have for now.
Okay, thank you. That'll bring us to superintendent comments.
So some general comments. Let me walk you through the PD development that we did with our staff. Basically, if you remember, we've added additional PD time at the start, and we dedicated that additional PD time to make sure our staff were ready to work in the environment that we were asking them to come into. So the synchronous blended learning has been a major theme of the PD that we provided. We talked and trained our teachers on how to use the laptops that they have, which, by the way, we've tested in numerous settings. The cameras are fine. The microphones are fine. It's really, they all have a very powerful device provided by the district. It's not a personal device. It's a district device, and it will help them to project for both the remote learners and the students who are in the classroom. So that's been the focus of the PD time for us. In addition to that, we've provided training on PowerSchool, making sure that our staff understand how PowerSchool is set up and how it will function. Today was the first day with students in the building, so I visited schools and took some photos, and I wanted to share them with the board. This was, actually, I have the photos in reverse order because this is lunch, which was the last thing at the high school. But here's what I was impressed by. First of all, I didn't see any issue with masks throughout the buildings. So here you see high schoolers who are lined up. They have their masks on. My quick measurement says that they've got the 3 to 6 feet of social distancing in place. You can see our staff are wearing masks and gloves as they're doing the serving of the food. And so really, everything just sort of fell into place very nicely for lunch at the high school. Earlier in the day, I was in a science classroom. And here you can see, and these are not staged photos. This was me walking into a classroom and taking a picture. And here you have students who are all socially distanced throughout the room. They are wearing their masks. They are listening to the teacher who is just off to the left-hand side of the photo. And so actually, I believe this was a math classroom because it was Sean Connolly who was delivering instruction in the room. You'll notice the gentleman with the sort of to the right has his laptop out. He's on his keyboard, and so he's engaged. And this is one example of what I walked into at the high school when I was visiting there.
You can't even tell who they are under the mask, so you don't even have to hide it.
Here I went into Ms. Gaspar's classroom, and I went back to where her desk is, and I took a picture going forward. So you can see in the photo, I'll point out a few things that I noted. She has taped out an area in the front of the board. So you can see the tape marks that are on the floor. She has a stool that's set in that taped off area. She's got her projector going. She's got the Google Classroom being displayed. And she was actually using a book in her hands that she was referencing as part of what they were doing.
And there's a really cute sophomore in there wearing a white shirt named Michael McDonald.
Yours.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. Thanks for pointing that out. And so in this case,
Excuse me, is she wearing a mask?
no, in this case, they all have the masks off because she's in her box,
Mhm.
right? So she's got her 6-foot box up front.
Yep.
The students are all sitting at their desks. Remember what the rule is. If
Yep.
you can maintain 6 foot of distance, you can remove your masks. And so that's what they were doing inside that classroom. So again, if you look at the class sizes here, that was a very reasonable class size to walk into.
Ooh.
And then it gets cuter when you get that. I know Michael's cute, but wait till you see this. So now we're down at kindergarten,
Nice.
and again, the students. Now remember, these are students who are literally day one of school, right? And everyone I went into, the children all had masks on. They were all kind of in their space. This teacher, you will notice, has put tape marks on the floor as to where the chair legs need to go. But students are still being allowed to, like this guy here with the blocks, probably is out of this chair. So there's a little bit of movement that's allowed, but it's okay. He's got his mask on and everybody's complying with the expectation in that room. In this case, we look at I believe it's a first grade classroom, and I want to point a few things out. So this teacher is wearing what's called a Humidity Shield. So the Humidity Shield is basically a plastic shield that goes over the face. And then you'll notice that it has sort of the mask-like material that surrounds the face. So you're able to wear this shield without droplets getting out of the area. So you don't have to have a face mask on with a shield, because the shield itself has the built-in area to catch the droplets, so that you would prevent the spread of the COVID by wearing that. So this is a real critical tool that we've given to our teachers, especially at the younger grades, because they can see the mouth. And when you're working on forming letter sounds and so forth, you want to be able to see how the teacher is actually enunciating what is being said. So this allows that. The other thing is, especially for our younger learners, I mean, as I'm walking around today, I'm smiling like crazy. Just like
They
this.
can't see you.
I
I'm
know.
smiling like crazy. And here, you can tell that the teacher is in fact smiling. The teacher is having facial expressions with the students. Here, you'll also notice that there are some students wearing masks and some that are not wearing masks. But you'll notice that she has mapped out on the floor the 6 foot distancing. And so I believe in a second, you're going to see that the teachers are united in the sense of the way they're having their students frame and think about this. So this classroom, so this is Miss Webster's classroom, and you can see that she has the marks on the floor also. And the way it was explained to me is that that is each student's individual island. And so when they step into their personal space, that is their island. And when you are on your own island, you can take your mask off because you're inside your own island. If
I love
everybody's in
it.
their island, they're good. However, if you leave the island, then you have to put your scuba mask on. You need your scuba mask when you're in the water. So if you're moving around the room, you have your scuba mask on. And when you're on your island, you're able to take it off. And I just thought this really showed, and again, I think the same thing, because I look at the colors on the floor. You'll notice the other first grade classroom is very united in color scheme and so forth. And it was a similar thing there. I think this young man has his mask on. This young lady does not, but they're both in their area. And so that's how
Probably
they're-
forgot it was on.
No.
Sometimes.
It's probably heading out to scuba dive in a bit.
Yeah.
It's very possible. But I just love that they're all sort of explaining this in the same way to the students and having them understand what they need to do. And then this picture, there aren't any cute kids in this one, but I wanted to show you the cafeteria at Griffin. So you'll notice that the cafeteria tables are all pushed into the back corner. That's probably where they're going to be for the year, because it's not seating that makes any sense in the pandemic. And students at Griffin are eating in the classroom, so there's no need to have the cafeteria table set up.
I do think there are 3 classrooms. They identified 3 classrooms that have to utilize the CAF, but they're using that.
That is
That's it.
correct. And the reason is that in many cases, this is because it's a peanut-free zone. And so it's easier to maintain a peanut-free area in the cafeteria than in a classroom, because you have to have enough distancing between students who might have something made with peanut butter and those who don't. So Corey's exactly right. That's why this was set up. And there is a peanut-free table that is clearly distanced from the other tables. The other thing is this will allow them to use this space for academic purposes. So there will be classes and small group meetings that will take place in there. And, one student sitting across from another at that large table space will work out very nicely. So they've set the cafeteria up accordingly. And then the last thing to show you is this sign that I snapped a picture of while I was at LMS. And these are all throughout the building. I pledge to wear a mask, practice social distancing, wash my hands, and stay at home when I'm sick, and inform the main office. And so the fact that these signs, which go right to the guidance that we have, if you boiled everything down, like what are we trying to accomplish? These are the big 4: the mask, the distance, washing of hands or sanitizing of hands, and then staying at home when sick. So I just had to grab that picture and bring it in for the board also. So I don't know if anybody has other questions on page 1. I'd be happy to answer those, but I wanted you to at least see a glimpse of what I saw walking around.
Did you happen to be at GMS during drop off or pickup?
I did not catch either one.
I was
So
wondering
talk to me
about that.
it. How did you hear
I don't know.
something?
I was at LMS and LMS was smooth. It went very, very well. I just curious like how GMS went.
I asked more of the question when I got there, how was drop off this morning? And she said it's going to take time to get used to the routine. She said some of the buses pulled into the loop with cars. And so they it's just a communication flow and getting people accustomed to the change that we made down there. So, but I
The
didn't.
buses are
actually
dropping
realize
off in the little loop. Oh, no, they're in the parking lot
The
and the playground.
the buses are to keep using the bus loop as it is, and they will be intermingled with the
With
cars.
cars.
The difference is that when the bus gets there, they're going to open the door and let the kids out.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
not going to
sit,
sit there
yeah.
for 15
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, it's brutal.
So that's just, it seemed, especially at this time, when you have those buses pull in and you're waiting for the rest of the buses to come, that was not something that we didn't want to have a group of kids sitting
Right.
on the bus for
Yeah,
an
yeah.
extended period of time.
Is there enough staff to be outside on duty and also in the classrooms welcoming kids, or are they lining up outside and then walking in as a class?
I think at least for the first week.
Yeah.
And they said they might do it for the first couple weeks, is they're going to line up as
Okay.
classrooms and go in together
Until they know where they're going.
until they know where they're going. So that's going to be part of the adjustment.
And they're all coming through the main entrance?
What's that?
They're all coming through the main entrance?
Yes.
At the elementary school, were all the seats able to make it 6 feet away so that they can potentially take off their mask when they're at their desk?
At
Do you
which
know?
school?
I'm sorry, I meant GMS.
Yes.
At GMS.
So I didn't point this out, but if you look at that kindergarten classroom, we had purchased tables for kindergarten. But the tables have been taken out and those individual desks have been put in and they are able to maintain the distancing.
It's great.
Unfortunately, we had several desks that were stored in the 30s building. So we were able to utilize those. Those were adjustable in height. So I think Joe pulled those and brought them in for the kindergarten and adjusted them to the appropriate height.
Glad we held on to those. I'm glad we held on to those.
Well, we needed the room in the 30s building
Yeah.
because we now have storage shipping containers on site at LMS and CHS. But they were able to get all the stored furniture into the 30s building.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
I also thought I heard that at LMS the first 2 weeks the kids were going to wear masks the whole time, but of course I see pictures there of high school and elementary not wearing them. Obviously, when they're 6 feet away, and I just was wondering if is that still it true at LMS or not? Or
I
just trying to
heard that
prepare my
too.
boys.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
I don't know what
So
happened.
tomorrow I'm going to LMS. I
Oh, okay.
couldn't get there today, but I will ask that question of the principal.
And how did day one with the online students go? You know, when we have discussions like this showing photos of the in-person students, I feel like right along with that, we should have discussions with the remote students and how they're doing.
Yeah, it was a little harder to take pictures of because many were remote. But
Right.
I went to LMS and I would say about a third of the families came in person to hear the overview by the principal. He live streamed and recorded that, so it was available to families later. So they were able to see that at their own time. And then teachers were available to answer questions that the families may have. So I don't believe we had remote students participating today.
no, it
So
was just
either.
kind of
It was
a,
really like they had their day. Now it's the 9th and
Yeah.
10th grade day at the high school today. Tomorrow's 11 and 12. Next Wednesday, which is the all-in day, that's where it will be.
Yeah.
The teachers using their device to both project to remote learners and to the in-person.
And I collected some feedback from the remote families on that Facebook page, and I shared it with the board. And I hope that goes to the admins as well, just kind of this is
Why
what-
are the parents not contacting the principals?
I asked if anyone had any feedback that I would share it with the board and the superintendent. I have been encouraging them to reach out to their teachers and follow the chain of command when there's a problem, but those comments were just, this is how today went.
And did they reach out to Jason to work out any of the kinks? Have you heard?
I'm sorry for the
Remote
All day
learners.
yesterday. So 7th grade didn't broadcast at all the presentation that Tom was doing. didn't broadcast it, so none of the students at home could see it. 8th grade had some glitches with the audio. They couldn't hear the teachers speaking. And then it just cut out completely at the end of their thing. And I think, like, there's a lot to be worked out and kinks to be figured out. I wish we had that as a parent of a remote kid, I wish that those students had the same opportunity to really spend time with their teacher. I had envisioned it as kind of a come in, bring your Chromebook. This is how you get into my classroom. If you click here and here, this is where you'll find this stuff. And it was really just a quick presentation.
The 5 and 6 live stream?
I
Just heard
I
about
haven't
7
heard
and
it
8.
I've seen all of
Yep.
Yeah, they intended to, and I know the intention was there, but it just glitched out for 7th and 8th grade for some reason. But so I think a lot of people are still kind of like, we don't feel quite ready just because of we haven't run through it like the in-person kids have.
And that was the model at LMS. LMS
Yeah,
chose
right,
to do it this
right.
way. CHS, the students were in for a longer period of time, walked through their schedule, met with their teachers. And the same thing at GMS, although I think GMS had more individual
They had
teacher
15,
conferences.
they had 15-minute time slots with their classroom teacher.
And so they were able to at least do that one-on-one meet
Yeah.
with the teacher. So each school sort of came at it a little bit differently, depending on how they wanted to set it up.
It was nice. The teachers seemed very excited to be starting, finally get off and running. And it was good to see everybody. Graham said hi to a couple of his buddies, and, we made it positive.
My son had a fabulous day today. He said the teachers are so excited to be back, and he was really he had low expectations, but today was good. Well, that's a high schooler, but he was they needed that, and I think teachers needed that too.
I think just my impression from walking around the building, of course, CHS is kind of set up in a one-way maze right now. So, but to walk around and actually see the kids back in the class and see the teachers interact with them, it really seeing life back in the buildings was nice.
It's a nice thing.
Really nice.
So I do have a question. If somebody does the screening form and realize that they need to stay home that day, I'm not sure that the alternative of learning from home that day has been clearly communicated with folks. Like, what is that process? You call them in sick, right? Or do you not call them in sick? Well, I guess you do. You have to call them in. You have to call them in, but you're technically not sick because you're going to join remotely.
Well, you're still calling in sick.
Okay.
And it's really important that the nurses log that because they're
Okay.
going to ask questions. Okay, so are there COVID-like symptoms, et cetera? So we've got to collect some data as to what we're seeing. And then there will be some protocols coming out from the nurses shortly
Okay.
that will explain if that happens, how long should the students stay out, et cetera. So there'll be follow-up from the school. So the call-in sick is really critical. And then I think hopping online, it's a Google Meet. And so
Yeah.
the teachers will know that
Just make sure to hop on at the beginning of each of your class, and then you'll be instructed like everybody else.
and so they'll be able to hop in and join that.
I think it's touchy for kids that have allergies. I know this is my heavy allergy season.
Yes.
And I know what allergies are. At the minute there's a temperature involved, stay home. I think that's the number one thing. But it's hard for some parents. This is, yeah.
I think it's the two big things we're really looking for, the fever, because that tends to point to a virus. And the other is that loss of taste and smell.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They keep bringing that up as a key symptom. And so if somebody notices that, that's really important to know. All right, so a few other quick updates. Next up, I want to talk about sports. And so if you click the link that's been livened up in your agenda, there is a local plan for athletics. And so Josh put this together for you. And there is also a regional play plan. And basically, combining what we're going to do at the local level, we have joined into a regional group that we're going to play with, and then you have a copy of the schedule itself. So let me just go back to the local plan for a second. You can see that Josh has talked about the tentative schedule, and basically we have developed a cluster with Milford, Sauhegan, Hollis Brookline, Pelham, and Sanborn Regional School Districts. The reason is that we're trying to be within a 30-minute drive of the districts that we wanted to participate with. And we also looked for school districts that we knew were right on top of the COVID. We're in a similar school attendance situation as us, and that's why we hopped into that cluster. So, we will mix in a few other schools if necessary, but again, we're trying to minimize the amount of time the students will spend on the bus being transported to to a game. At this point, football hasn't yet been determined. All the schools are taking a much more conservative approach to a football schedule development
September 5th is what I heard the coaches meeting is.
to begin.
Yeah, to DOS it, yeah.
And last thing is to just point out that, we are at a little disadvantage here because we're a small school surrounded by a lot of big schools. So, it really didn't make sense for us to hop into some of the larger school districts. We needed to make sure that we picked districts that were maybe a little bit larger than us, but where we could have some decent competition. So that's why we joined the cluster that we listed there. Busing. So basically, First Student has said that we have access to 2 buses each day. And therefore, we're trying to limit that travel to about the 30 minutes of time. And that's going to limit the number of games that we can actually play. So JV games are being held off until October. So right now we're just getting going with our varsity sports, but we'll evaluate later how the events are going and can do additional adjustments if we can figure out how to fit those in. And on that note, I did want to just double check with the board on middle school athletics. I can't remember what we talked about, to be honest. I lost sight of middle school athletics. So
We said middle school is no different than CHS. So if we can go ahead with a schedule, we'll go ahead and try to get a schedule together.
excellent, because both Teresa and Beth are plugging ahead, trying to make some headway there. But honestly, I think all the schools right now are they parked the middle school question a little bit because they're trying to get the varsity athletics up and going. But then we'll continue to plug ahead and see what we can get scheduled.
Yeah,
there.
starting up though with tryouts, middle school,
Excellent.
with anticipation. Maybe there'll be games, maybe they won't.
So golf. So one thing that Josh is asking the board to consider is allowing golfers to travel after signing a waiver by themselves or by their parents to the home courses for practicing and home matches. And basically, the 2 home courses we use are Hidden Creek and Passaconaway. But he just feels that with the 2 buses that were allocated, that we're too strapped on using those buses to then have travel to the home course be used in that way. So he is allocating a bus when we have an away match, but he's hoping that with a waiver will allow travel in town.
I don't think we've ever used a bus for golf,
I don't know.
regardless. My son played all through, and they always had to get to the course
But they
themselves.
always just self-transport.
Self-transport?
Golf's
really?
never transported within town, as far as I know.
Okay.
How about away?
Do you need a vote?
Way, yeah.
So Josh, we have a waiver.
Is he asking in town, not going to like Canterbury?
No. He's
Just
asking to
Passaconaway
get
and
from
just
Campbell
three
High
town
School
members
to
bus.
Passaconaway. That
Yeah, I don't think we've ever transported.
okay.
So he's confident that the 2 buses that we have will be able to transport all the other teams. So we don't need a waiver for parents to take kids to other. Okay.
Nope.
All right.
He's asking for here is to get to the 2 courses in Litchfield, and we'll have a waiver for that. So I don't know if the board needs to vote or if you just, without objection, we'll just plug ahead and get that set up. All right, so we'll plug ahead and get it set up. So COVID protocols, we'll talk about in a minute. Yep.
All right, well, I guess it comes in that because he lists team size, like soccer is 20. Is that because of how many kids can fit on the bus?
It looks like only varsity.
Right.
Yeah.
It is limited by the bus, as I understand.
Okay. So is that including coaches or is that 20 players plus coaches? The reason I ask is I think about football. Football is 40. So you have 2 buses, but you get like 12 coaches. Right?
They
How many
usually
coaches?
drive themselves.
Yeah.
They
and
put one on each
Michelle,
bus.
what's our bus number? Is it 28 on a bus?
26.
26. So I think
They
he's
drive
actually,
themselves.
I think he's got 20 players plus the coaches, because if he's putting 26 on the bus with the socially distanced, I think that answers how he's doing it. So COVID protocols, those will be in the other report. New coaches. So we have hired pending references, Dan DeForney. Now, Dan is our middle school PE teacher, so I hope his
Nice.
references are good. Callie Trunka is new to us, and so we are doing the reference checks there. But she is being brought on as the assistant soccer, or they're both being brought on as assistant soccer coaches. So Dan with the boys and Callie with the girls. Yep.
Mike, just to back up, looking at the numbers, the coaches aren't being told they have to limit their practices to 20 players, so they can have varsity and JV, so they can have inter-squad scrimmages and everything.
I believe it's the case. I think it's only a limit
It's travel.
for the travel. Yep.
Football's 40 players, you know that, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's why I said they're using both buses, but they have all those coaches too.
They would be using both buses, but I think they loaded the equipment on one of the buses as well. So I don't think didn't they, for football?
Sometimes they had a truck
Yeah, but
follow behind.
I think there were
Yeah.
times that it would end up in the bus as well.
So locker rooms, basically the protocol is that the locker rooms are closed to PE classes. So just to be clear that they're not in use during the day. We're only going to use them for athletics after school, and only 10 students max are allowed in, and they have to wear masks in the locker room. So that will help in terms of the changing. For events, visiting teams have been informed that they have to show up ready to play. So that's the same for us. I'm sure other schools have said you show up ready to play. You're not going to have access to a locker room when you get there. And again, more details on that are in the cluster report. And next, the NHIAA. Basically, where it stands right now is that it's an open tournament at the end of the season. So we're allowed to play whatever season we want, whichever schools we want to play. And then there will be an open tournament at the end of the season. So at that point, we would be in a Division III tournament seed, except for volleyball, which we've automatically bumped up to Division II. So we will have to look at the 45-minute. I mean, we had said we're trying to get about 30 minutes. 45 is our maximum travel time. But obviously, if you get in the tournament, you may have to travel further at that point, because that's where the schools will be.
Well, the good thing is we'll be deeper into the year and have a better feel of like how things are going.
Either we'll have really settled into a nice groove and have a good handle on it, or it will be in some other shutdown mode, and maybe the tournaments don't even occur. Let's just face that reality that could unfold on us. And then you can see all the tryout dates that are listed here for you. So,
Like, one thing I heard today I thought was a good idea, just you might mention to Josh, is our school, we were instructed to do our senior days the first game of the year, assuming we'll get those off.
I asked him that last
Interesting.
week.
excellent.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a decent idea.
That's a
Did he
good
say-
idea.
He said they're going to celebrate the seniors when everything comes out. So,
So, just a way to get it.
Yeah.
You may not wait to the end, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so there's that doc, and the other report is there for you. So basically, it gets into the deeper details of how the schools have all agreed to operate. So basically, the ADs from the schools all got together, had a meeting, worked out these protocols. Stuff like spectators. Every athlete is going to be handed 2 passes pre-printed. Those are the only 2 passes that you can use to get into a game. So there'll be very limited spectators allowed. In the perfect world, mom gets one and dad gets the other, but that's not always the case of how the passes get dished out. But again, we've all agreed on the way we're going to control access to the games by spectators and so forth. So I guess at this point, rather than go through this page by page, it's 9 pages. Let me just pause and see if you have questions or things that I can bring back to Josh.
I have
from
something to bring back to Josh, or maybe it's even another department, because with each player only being allowed 2 spectators, I was thinking it would be a good idea potentially to have the games live streamed. Maybe there's one person that could do it for the benefit of, the student body or anybody else who wants to watch it. And I was thinking actually, something later on our agenda would be the like a sophomore or senior project. And I would say that would be a great project for maybe even a couple of people.
I have info if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Josh was way ahead of this.
good.
Started asking me about mid-August. We are planning to stream, well, luckily I have 2 sophomores and a senior needing projects.
Awesome.
So the plan is to stream every home game I can. Luckily, football is on Saturdays. Shouldn't be a problem. And anything in the gym, obviously cross country, it's not going to happen. Anything in the gym, like volleyball, will happen. The only problem with soccer is an afternoon sport played on the same field. It's just I just have to figure out how I'm going to do it by myself. Well, just with one helper. But the plan is to do as many home games streamed as possible. So that's, and like you said, it was the senior project and the sophomore project's going to help out with that.
Fabulous.
And grind it over
Good.
there.
And then a schedule somewhere, like a centralized schedule where people can know when the games are on,
Well, you guys get something from Josh. I just asked him to send me the same thing. So I'll see the schedules. And when I know the schedules,
Yeah,
those are the
right.
times. So I've been doing football 2 years now. But
Awesome.
the other sports, up until that meeting, we really didn't really have a solution for the gym. So Jason helped us out with that. So that's the plan.
Mike, the only other thing I'd say, if you read through their regional play, we're running into now, every school has different attendance policies. It says in there, each school makes their own. So we've already got a handful of schools we're playing up in Guilford that are not allowing any spectators, team on. So parents will want to make sure they communicate with their kids what's allowed for away games.
He said, he wrote that in an email
It's
saying you have to watch it from
Yeah,
your
It's
car.
in there, so
Oh,
it's not a blanket to some are allowing more, some are allowing less.
Anything else on sports?
No, I think several people sent Josh questions anyway, just to inquire.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch that have gone from the board these answered. So,
Good.
All right. So I just want to talk quickly about contracts. So our intent is to issue contracts to the coaches and to, we'll put some sort of clause in there just in case the season gets shortened and the board wants to take some action down the road. I don't envision that with the amount of time that's gone into planning and preparing, but I do want to, if we get shut down by September 15th, I think we ought to have some language in there just in case the board wanted to take action.
I think as of right now, Rob, you had to test this. You're probably about a third into
Well, but there's a difference. I still want to argue that we have a football coach and a volleyball coach who have done it within the rules for the whole summer. I think they should get their full contract, even if.
No, what I'm saying, like the other coaches are probably like a third in.
I would think, I would think, because if
The
they
others
haven't
are-
practiced all summer, then
Yeah.
they haven't, I'm sure they start playing now, but they're also 2 weeks after they should have started, so.
And I
I have
think
no problem.
if it does end up getting shut down, we'll just have that discussion like we
Yeah.
did last year and do what's fair and, right to the coaches.
But we,
But Brian,
when we
I-
did that last time, we hadn't issued contracts yet. So it was easy to take action because they
Right.
didn't have a piece of paper. Once we give them a paper, we're committed to following through on that salary. So
But I would like to just put the plug, I really believe our football coach and our volleyball coach worked with Josh, worked all summer. I really think they earned their full contract working throughout the summer. So I would like to, again, if I get voted down, I get voted down, but I'd like to stress that. I'm very thankful that they worked with our kids all summer when they didn't have to.
And then the last item is just to clear up because we had the discussion at the last meeting about captain's practices. So in fact, they're not allowed by the NHIA rule. And so
On school grounds.
the-
Not allowed.
Not allowed
Very
anywhere.
clear.
And so the way it operates is it used to be that the coach couldn't engage with the students until the first official day. They softened that rule. That's the rule that got changed. So the coach is able to offer in the season immediately prior. the coach is able to participate and offer coaching to the students. So that's what we've been following. So they're not captain's practices. They are allowed coaching practices. As Rob said, football and volleyball have been outside of Campbell since July, whenever we opened that up. And that's all permitted by the rules. So those were not captain's practices. They were coaches' practices that were being held. So just to be clear that we are following the rules, doing what the NHIA has asked us to do and what we've agreed to do. All right, a couple of other quick things. The PE credits for athletics. So Michelle did a little bit of research and came across that action item that you can see if you click on the link. And we have been in contact with the high school because we're trying to find out when the board took this action back in 2009. So it's 11 years old. But basically it allows students to earn PE credit by participating in athletics. And it's not a policy. So to be clear, the board took action, but it's not in the policy manual. Our thought was that it should have been incorporated into some document at the high school, such as a program of studies, maybe the handbook. So we're really trying to source out exactly what happened with this. And we can't find any evidence that it was ever rescinded by the board.
Nice.
And in fact, it was a proposal that came forward from the high school saying this is what we would like to do. If you look at it, it's on Campbell High School kind of letterhead. And so it was a proposal from the high school to do that. So we are working to get this cleared up and know that we have a board vote in the past. And if we need to come back to the board for more, we will. But our intent is to pursue that.
Did we hire the part?
With the policy? It says there has to be a varsity sport. You have a kid that, and I'm just thinking this, that drives me crazy in Guilford because they have the same policy. You have a kid that hates gym, decides they're going to try bass fishing, they're going to try golf, they're going to try cheer. I don't care what it is. They're horrible.
But they
If
tried.
they try,
Yeah.
why does it matter if they play varsity or JV? If we're going by competency, it's a tough thing. And they try their hardest. They're not the best, but they try. They show up at every practice. They show up at every, that'd be my only concern with that.
Yeah, I have the same concern actually.
Did we hire a part-time gym teacher?
So at 3:34 this afternoon,
Oh, okay.
I was handed an application packet and I said, but not for tonight, right? Because I haven't interviewed
Fair
the
enough.
person yet. So they have a candidate in mind,
Okay.
but it's on my
Yeah.
desk.
So back
I'm
to
fast, but not that fast.
that'd be my only request for the high school if they'd look at that. Just
Excellent.
because I think if the effort's there.
But bass fishing's only 2 days.
Well, but I mean.
That shouldn't
that's
count.
So, but picture a kid in football that's out there getting hit.
Oh,
trying his
and he
hardest.
shows up and
Yeah,
any
shows up
kid
every
that, yeah,
practice. Because he's not
soccer,
gifted
golf, right, you're right.
athletically, should he not get the credit?
In fairness, when we found this and sent it to the high school, of course, we're in the middle of starting school with all these
Yeah, no,
new
Yeah.
no
parameters.
problem.
So we'll report back.
And
But
this-
we did.
If you need to put it off, until after this
Yeah.
whole mess is over.
No, we need to know where we're headed on it. So, substitute update. So basically, as the board knows, we're in the middle of impact bargaining with our associations. And when the board took action at the last meeting to raise the substitute teacher rate, it also said substitute paraprofessional rate. And so we have traditionally paid the same rate to both teachers and paras. The problem is that the rate of pay that we settled on far exceeds what paras are paid per the collective bargaining agreement. And so that caused a little bit of a ripple effect. So we're bringing forward tonight this memo from Holly, basically asking to index the rate of pay that we pay to our subs to the collective bargaining agreement and to the lowest hourly rate that is in the agreement. So somebody who is on step one. And so the advantage to doing this is the following. First of all, next year when the collective bargaining rates change, it'll allow us to have the sub pays keep up with that. It'll allow us to plug that number into the budget process so that we know in predicting how much to budget for subs, what dollar amount. And it'll help us to stay competitive because we found that we're pretty far behind on some of these things. So we have trouble getting substitute custodians, but we were paying $10 an hour. When you drive by your local McDonald's and you can make $12 an hour, for working in McDonald's, you have to at least have something that comes out as being somewhat competitive. So if the board is willing to adopt this, it will set those rates kind of adjusted against our collective bargaining, and it'll give us better control and able to keep up with it down the road. So.
If I made a motion to accept the substitute rates, would that be enough to say?
Now we go ahead and stay with the rates are, Rob.
Stay with it, sir. To accept the substitute rates for paraprofessional for $13.34, substitute custodian for $13.81, substitute food service for $10.27, and substitute office help for $13.80 per hour. Do I need to state the teachers or the?
I would say that it's step one, because those will, that's really what we want to align it to.
So instead of the hours, just say step one of the.
Right, but that's the rate.
The
For
current
step one.
rate.
Yeah,
Correct.
Current
indexed
rate
indexed as
indexed to
indicated.
the,
Mike, do I have to say substitute teachers?
No, because we already did the sub
Okay.
teachers, so we're really kind of breaking out those other
Okay.
subs.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Rob made a motion. Tina second. Further discussion?
so if our grid, whatever that is called, goes up, these will automatically go up, or will that prompt I just want to make sure, okay.
Well, it's all subject to negotiations. So
But yeah, but it'll always be the step one.
Of the contract, right?
Right. And then when step one changes,
Yep.
which, by the way, in the second year of the deal next year, it doesn't change. So step one stays the same. So this will stay indexed to that.
Oh,
But
okay.
if you negotiate another agreement in the future, and we
I
will,
see.
I should say
Yeah.
when we negotiate, and when step one changes and adjusts,
Yeah.
then these would go with it.
Should I modify the?
And they would be in any cost proposals that we're considering at that point in time anyway.
They would have to come over to that, right?
We need to modify it then to say the substitute rates at the current step one of, would that be better to say or no?
he already did. I mean, this is step one. The next year it's going to be step one again.
Yep.
So
Okay.
any other conversation? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Tina?
Aye.
Tara?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Brian's an aye. 5-0-0.
All right, thank you for that. That will help us. And the last two items then. So you can see that we received a letter from the Department of Ed relative to our special ed programming. They do an audit on the school each year. And the good news is that we had no faults and no issues. So in looking at this letter, it's all good news. And I just wanted to share that with the board, that our special ed performance.
They were all zero, so that meant no incidences,
no
yeah.
incidents. So
Yeah.
we had a good year last year with our special ed and meeting all our deadlines and requirements. So the
Awesome.
report's pretty detailed. If you have questions when you dig into it, feel free to ask. But it's good news. So I wanted to make sure the board had
Great
that in their hands.
to know.
And the last item for tonight is the enrollment update. Let me open it here. So we have had a number of students who have shown up at the various schools enrolling, but we've also had students who have been moving out of the district. So, I know that at Griffin, Joyce had like 11 new students that she had to enter into the system. And it takes time to enter a student into the system. It doesn't take as long to delete somebody from the system or to move them out, to transfer them out. So, so here are the numbers. And the first piece sort of gets to the question from the board. Devin had the authority to sort of figure out the preschool programming, and you can see the numbers. So basically there are 9 PK3 students and 12 PK4 students who are coming into the program. And then our kindergarten number now is at 66. Our first grade number is at 78. Our second grade number is at 87. And our third grade number at 91. Fourth grade at 75.
So does that mean the preschool teachers are only working aren't they half day?
I need to check in on that.
Because
Liz.
those are really low numbers.
Let me get back to you on
Like,
that.
are there gonna be 3 in one class and 6 in another? And yeah, I was just curious.
Well, you'll notice too, it was 11 and 20, and now it's 9 and 12.
Which
So there's a little bit of an
yeah.
error on that chart.
Oh, right.
But let me just do a double check on exactly when they're doing that.
In their class sizes and stuff, that would be interesting.
We've had a lot of attention on the first grade number. That still is at 78. I think 85 was our magic number, right? That would have triggered that additional teacher, and we're not there yet. So at the middle school, the numbers are all below 100, which I think is a first, that we have all the classes below 100. 93, 93, 91, and 90. And
So
then at the
these are all physical in person, and they're including the remote, but you've taken out those who have withdrawn.
Correct.
Okay.
And remember that there could be families that are still in the process of transferring or withdrawing that we don't know about.
Sure.
So this is currently registered
you
and
know about,
enrolled
yeah.
in our system.
How many
So-
withdrawals have there been, Mike? Do we know?
Sorry,
How many total withdrawals have there been?
Just the first
I can get you that number. I don't have it right off the top. But we can get that number for you. And remember, we pay attention to October 1st enrollment. That's the magic number that we really want to pay attention to.
Yep.
So we're still a ways away from the October 1st number. And at the high school, we're at 117, 115, 101, and 112. So the high school right now is planning to open with 445. They're running about 87% in person, and the remaining 13% are remote. So their numbers are among the higher numbers. The middle school has 367, but they're running almost 30% remote. So in person in the middle school are the more generous numbers. And then Griffin, which is at 428, has about 20% remote. So so that's helps the board understand what we're wrestling with in terms of class setup.
Mike, I hate to ask because things can change. Have we started to think about what happens starting next year at the high school when these numbers start hitting the high school? Like as far as filling positions with retirements, and because next year alone, if nothing changes, we're losing 22, and then another 10 the year after that, and another, 22 the year, 80 something kids in 4 years, if nothing changes.
Well, if you remember, this year we took a riff of a English teacher and a social studies teacher. So we monitor those numbers every year.
Okay.
And if that trend continues, you're looking at a 367 student high school in 4 years' time.
I guess I'm
So-
just worried more about programming. What does it do to Mary's programming?
Absolutely. Yep. The good news is that we're getting so good at remote learning and alternative learning experiences like VLAX and so forth that I'm not sure that it's going to really put a dent in what a student can access. The way they access it may differ, but at least they'll still have access to a really comprehensive program.
And I know this is something we can't figure out at all. Is there any way to, what would you expect? Say we find out we had 12 students leave the district this year. Would the expectation be we'd get half back? I mean, is there any way to?
So I would be very cautious about making any assumptions from the numbers in the middle of the pandemic, because people are making choices that make sense in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'm not at henny penny, the sky is falling, because I think even students who choose to do something different for a year are going to come back to us. I think from a marketing angle, what we do, which is in-person live instruction by highly qualified and talented teachers, is incredibly important to people. And so even though they may take a short-term look at doing something different, I think ultimately kids want to be with their friends. They want to be back in school. And I think they'll migrate
I will make
back.
more of that. I mean, my prediction is that it will come almost all the way back, because what I looked at in terms of numbers, and I know it's not an exact comparison, but I looked at the first Friday counts in September last year versus this year, and LMS is just about the same from grade to grade. Yeah, I mean, I have 3 grades minus 1 person, and I'm looking at the adjusted grade. You know what I mean? Like last year's fifth grade moving up to sixth, we've lost one person. Last year's sixth grade moving up to seventh, we've lost one. And then one grade, it's +3. So LMS is pretty much even. CHS, I mean, we actually have 3 kids more that at CHS. So it's all elementary. All the differences are coming from elementary. And I feel like those people will come back for the most part.
And it's still early.
It is.
And I think just a little bit of response to some of the comments that came in. It's early. We haven't even delivered our first synchronous instruction yet. And I know there's anxiety on the part of the teachers. How am I going to do this? There's anxiety on the part of the families. How is it going to be received? But I just encourage everybody to exercise some patience while we work on this. We've provided training. The tools are there. And now there's a little bit of trial and error that goes into it. Our first day of remote learning on March, what was that, the 16th, I think, it wasn't as good as it was a month later. So we just need to realize that there is going to be a learning curve that will go with this. And I think that patience and restraint is important right now.
I agree with you, Mike. I don't feel like the remote learners and parents are in as confident a place as I would hope for them to be at this point in time. You know, we've had our how you doing, come in and meet your teachers, and you know, it didn't go as planned, and I wouldn't, you know, I hope that we can get things up and running and make sure that things are running as smoothly for the remote kids as for the in-person kids, because it looked like all the preparations that we made for the in-person kids worked. I mean, those pictures showed us happy, vibrant classrooms, and that's what we were hoping for. So I'm just hoping that we can make that happen for the remote kids too.
Have teachers reached out to you, Jason, telling you their issues, lagging and stuff like that, and you've addressed them?
Yep, we have the IT ticket system that has some stuff, and we've just been pegging things off as we go. Some of it's a training piece, some of it's, you know, either repair or do something. So not everything has been perfect, and we're just hitting those as needed.
Yeah.
Some parents have reached out, and we're in the middle trying to do, you know, oh, camera's not working or an account or whatever. So we're doing.
Yeah, no, I know that, and I you know,
Yeah.
I know that everybody's working overtime to make sure it's up and
definitely
running
not
and working.
silent, you know, and it's a lot of that trial and error, and okay, let's try this, let's try that, and then, you know, thinking a little bit differently, because it's a whole new world, right?
Yeah. Would there be an opportunity to do a dry run for the remote kids? I mean, before the first day of school? I know the high school kind of had that yesterday. They had kids in person and at home.
So
And
what
the other
was
schools offer the
yesterday
same
for the
opportunity?
remote? It was
No.
just a presentation. It wasn't going
It
through
was
the
just a
Don't go live at all.
presentation and then walk over and meet your teachers. So they didn't go through the meeting the teacher, logging into the classroom. This is what this is going to be. I'm going to put your assignments here. You check in with me with this. This is how you email. I think something like that just would give those kids a little more what to expect. So CHS did that, and my understanding is that LMS and GMS didn't.
I'm trying to think of how, I mean, tomorrow is the other 2 in-person grades. Friday is a day off.
Well, shouldn't the
Labor Day
online kids
Monday.
be logging in during one of those half days for in person? No?
No, because we're really trying to focus on the 3 groups, the
Separately,
ease-in, phased-in
individually.
approach, right? So
Okay.
yesterday was remote learners, today was half the school, tomorrow's the other half of the school. The only other opportunity might be on Tuesday, but we have PD planned
I
on
know
Tuesday, so I just
know
don't know how we
everybody's super
sneak it in.
busy. I think it was just a missed opportunity.
I just had a question, actually, Jason. The kids who are remote, especially the ones at the elementary school that they're not in a grade where it's one-on-one, are we making sure they all have access to a Chromebook? How is that process?
Dan and Maura have been pretty busy with
Okay.
that. there is the lack of Chromebooks, but we've been doing everything that we can. I think that they, I don't know the exact numbers, but I was talking with Maura earlier, and I want to say somewhere around 80 or 90, give or take, remote students. I believe that they all have, anyone that needed a device has a device.
Okay.
and
That's in
then-
the total elementary.
Right.
But many of them already had one-to-one. So it's really just the first couple grades, right?
Well, GMS didn't have one-to-one, but some of those remote students might have already
Right,
had
right,
the
right,
Chromebook that we loaned out to them for remote learning. So, which means that there's less Chromebooks in the building, but that's starting to change as deliveries are coming.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay.
What's that?
Yep, thank you.
That brings the school board comments. Anyone?
I think I said,
We put 2 topics in there, Brian.
Well, I have a comment, but I just wait and see if anyone, that's all right.
Okay, I thought you were moving on.
No, I will in a moment. I want to make a statement because I wanted to do this at our last meeting. I didn't have an opportunity to do so, and it's kind of like flustering since then. So I just want to, we joined Facebook several years ago, led by Tina, to be a little bit more transparent. Unfortunately, I think with Facebook right now, it's reached a point of being counterproductive and unhealthy. So going forward, this board will not be influenced by Facebook. It will not be a driving force on how we deal with an issue. It's become very negative, narrative platform led by a small group of people who want to complain and put the school system down on a regular basis. We have an avenue for the public to reach the board and give input at meetings, and that's what we'll do, and that's what we'll accept. So I just want to put that out there. It just seems that there are many groups right now that are forming, and I think a lot of the information just starts rolling, becomes more and more negative, and rather than directing their comments where they should, it just keeps flustering, and it's just counterproductive to us. That's my comment. And I encourage the public out there that if they do have something, community forums coming up, and we have it every one of our meetings. If not, they can email the board and just give us, the entire board, what their thoughts are. But I would encourage them, because it's a lot of items I see on Facebook that actually should just go to the schools. And I think a lot of it is getting missed and lost. So that's what I got.
The 2 items that we parked here for the board to think about, there's been question about remote students accessing the schools. So we've been pretty clear that if you chose to be remote, then you are a remote student, and that coming in to take classes as a remote student is not being remote, that's in person. So we currently have a 5-day-a-week in-person model that people could have chosen. And we have a 5-day-a-week remote model that people could have chosen. But we're seeing more and more families that are almost building their own hybrid by saying, well, we want to be remote, but for math and science, we want to come in. And then now we're getting into people saying, well, for math and science, we want to come in 2 days a week. Not all the time, but just Tuesday and Thursday. And so it's really getting, that's not what we're equipped to do. We're a 5-day-a-week delivery model. And, you know, when we put that out there, we didn't put a caveat on it that, although it did define that it meant you were coming in 5 days a week. It definitely was in the definition, but somehow people have decided that they can sort of tailor this, and it's become a problem for us. So the other thing is that,
add to that, because I know we had conversation about it. So it's not only remote students, it's also homeschools
homeschool students too.
that they are.
And so
homeschool.
Traditionally, we have allowed homeschool students to come in and have access to the program. If you read the state law, what it says is that you can't discriminate against homeschool students. So basically, if the board would take action to just be clear that you're either remote or you're in, then it applies to homeschool students also, right? So
My concern with that would be discriminating against if we had a homeschool student, that's been homeschooled their whole career and come in for science their whole career. I don't see why we would exclude them this year.
I think because we're in a different situation, Rob. That's why
But what I'm saying is if they've done it, you know what I mean? If it's not a pick or choose, if they've been homeschooled all along, it's not the remote.
I think we're just
I'll
trying.
always defer to you.
Yeah.
I just worry about that one. Would that be then discriminating against that student?
No, I think we have to be, again, in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm not a person who's ever going to shut a door on any child. But we right now we're trying to manage numbers and trying to manage the spread of a virus, and it's caused us to examine all sorts of practices. And this is one where, we gave parents the choice. We honored every single parent choice. And so now I just think we have to draw a few firmer lines so that we know exactly who's coming in. Because if we get into a contact tracing scenario, look at Bedford's been open for 3 days and they already have 3 schools with positive COVID tests, right, with students. So our ability to respond to that and to say who was where, who had contact, where were they coming from, et cetera, I think is really what's driving me to say we have to be really clear on what our expectation is. And the other part that sort of goes along with it is that we are allowing remote students to have access to athletics and co-curriculars because our co-curriculars will have some virtual experiences. They're not going to be all live and in person. So, now that we have the Google Meet available, you can participate in a club or activity from a remote location. Athletics, not so much. You have to be on the team. But I've already gotten a sense that some families are seeing that as talking out of both sides of our mouth, that we're saying, well, you're remote learning, but you can have access to the co-curriculars, but you can't have access to the band or to the science class. And so, again, I think we just have to be really clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And honestly, if the board takes action otherwise, direct us what to do. We'll put it in play. But we just need to know exactly where we stand on it.
I thought maybe not all, but co-curriculars just being done through Google Meet, that type of thing.
Not all. There will be some in-person co-curriculars that are meeting. So we have the list from the high school, and they pretty much have filled all the co-curricular stipends. But we need to go back now and say, before we issue contracts, how are these, we need a statement from the advisor, how they plan to meet the co-curricular expectations. So we've got a little more work to do. So Brian, some will be in person, some may be virtual after school. Because I think the board was pretty clear. You don't want us just shutting down. You don't want ghost towns at 2:30. And so we're trying to find a way to hit that median point.
What about robotics?
Robotics, we have a request today for access for robotics. And so that's another example where, it's an activity. It takes place largely at night and on weekends. And so what's the plan? How is robotics going to maintain all the rules, meet all the requirements? And I don't even know that robotics is having
Season?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Can you picture packing the
Robot.
SNHU
Yeah,
arena?
right.
It's not going to happen.
They may re-envision that whole thing too.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
My
will.
understanding is Robin is thinking about doing like a skill building. So it's, not related to a competition, but still building the skills and working on coding and all of that. So I guess I'm not clear. Are remote students able to access athletics and co-curriculars in the building?
They
In
have
person?
they have been allowed to do that.
There are no remote athletes in the building. Of the 2 indoor sports, there aren't any remote learners.
You mean there are no remote volleyball players?
Correct.
If there were, would they be allowed to?
I would say
participate?
no.
You would.
I would. That's why I asked Josh that question.
What's the other indoor sport?
Spirit?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but spirit's an outdoor sport according to the thing. It says they can only go to home outdoor activities in that.
So
Okay.
what about cross country? It's a co-curricular athletics. It's outside.
outside.
Can remote students participate? I'm advocating for,
outdoor sports, yes, because they're
What
not
about-
indoors.
So basketball
I think
too,
that's a
in
double
the fall.
standard. I think it's a horrible double standard.
I don't think people who signed up for remote signed up for that. I think that they were probably hoping that they would still be able to, if there were athletics,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean, be able to participate. My personal feel, I'll say how I feel, and I may be in the minority, but I do think that the remote students should have access to schools in a very limited capacity for hands-on classes where there is space available. Things like, technical classes or even band or labs. Again, only as space is available. And we would be taking attendance during the day. So we would know from a contact tracing perspective who was in that class.
The whole idea, though, Tara, my thing is we need to get the numbers to where the numbers were. And that's, we were hearing that from the LEA right from the get-go, that they want to minimize how many people are in the building. That's the first thing they said, right? They want to be safe. They want to minimize. Now you're going to start having this individual come in on this day, this one come in on this day, that one come in on this day. It's just, next thing you know, you just have this flow of people, like different times, teacher doesn't know who's coming, who's not coming.
So
That's why people had the option, and they had several chances to like decipher like what they want to do. Do you want remote or do you want all in?
I think they would need to make a case as to why it was important to come in and why that would provide them with kind of that enriched learning that they feel like that particular student can't get at home.
Is there room in any of the classes? Because the pictures I've seen and what I've heard, they're all pretty, especially at the high school, they're all tight.
Absolutely.
The arts and the science.
If it's a space issue, then it's a non-issue in my mind. Like it can't happen, and that's okay. But if there is space in the room, I feel like for individualized and personalized learning, we ought to consider that. And then part two for that is I do believe that they should be able to participate in athletics. From what we've seen from Josh, everybody's going to have their temperature taken every day for every sport. And they're going to have to go through even a more rigorous screening than getting into the school because, it's self-screening versus them actually doing the screening with the students.
I'm gonna continue to advocate for the remote kids. The fact that there's no room at CHS is because we had 87% of the high school population sign up for full in when we said the limit was 80-20.
We never said the limit was. We said that was our desire.
That was our goal.
We hope
That was our goal. We never said there was a limit.
I would argue that remote students and remote families did not know what we were signing up for because these decisions weren't made at that time. Remote learning was presented as a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning that will be better than the spring.
True.
And that's what we got. And I'm
it will be.
anticipating that, and I understand it will be, but I haven't seen the level of confidence in the remote planning that I have seen and the effort into going into the full in planning and execution. So I understand why parents are concerned, and I understand why parents are frustrated and feel as they've been dismissed and left to kind of fend for themselves and deal with it. So I understand that.
I don't feel like they're being dismissed. I think I have to just be. I would count. I dispute the assumption that by not having a remote only teacher, you're getting a lesser education. So I think that they, I think that they are going to get when they'll get an equal education.
Absolutely. And I hope that's true. And it remains to be seen, is what I'm saying. At this point,
everything remains to be seen.
I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah.
And, I think I have every faith in our teachers and our admins to make it work. And I've been very positive with my own kids because that sets the tone for the year. I wish there was more of an effort to build community with this group of families than I have seen so far.
By who? The teachers or the school?
Everybody.
What did they expect when they went
I know.
remote?
I think it's so hard. There
I'm
were so many questions up there. We are
confused.
doing our best to try to address everything. And I know that, the administrators are working literally 24/7 and have the whole entire summer.
I think we need to let it unfold. I think we need to start day one of school, the real day one of school, and see how it goes.
Okay.
I've had some families who reached out and are just, we think we made a mistake. We want to change. And I'm saying, we have to open school. We have to try what people signed up for. We cannot be flexing kids in and out over the first few weeks. So if the end of September comes and we feel like we have a handle on what we've done, we can certainly begin. If there's somebody who really comes forward and says, hey, my kid is not making educational progress, how do we make tweaks and adjustments? We'll have a better handle on it by then. But, we're still dealing with some staff requests that we don't fully understand all the implications on. So there's a lot that is still unfolding. And I think Brian's right. Letting it play out, getting some experience under our belt will be really important.
Yeah, and hopefully we can be flexible and bend as we need to. And pivot and all those other bingo words that we've been talking about all summer.
Pivot.
All right. So the board doesn't want to vote on these. We'll just plug ahead with what we've been doing in terms of the various students having access then.
Yep.
And it'll apply to homeschool as it does to remote. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So bring us to community forum. We don't have any callers on. And Tina, have you received anything?
Checking.
Yeah, I'll put the number out there because I gave it a while ago. If someone does want to call in, it's 1-866-899-4679. Access code is 292-443-637.
Heidi Ames sent 2 messages.
Yeah, she just emailed me and said, please disregard and do not read. There is no point.
Oh, it didn't come to the whole board, right?
Well, it goes to
No.
Tina for his
Input comes
correspondence.
to me and Michelle.
That's what we're doing, community input. That's what we're doing. So she did send something or not?
She did. If you'd like to see it, I can forward it to you, but
No one on the line, so we'll close community input. And we've already read the letter from Trixie Gardner.
Yep.
So that'll bring us to minutes from August 19, 2020. For a motion to accept the minutes.
I do, with the one change that I gave you. Did you get that? Okay, got it. I'll make a motion to approve the August 19th minutes with that one removal of the word not that I had indicated.
I'll second.
Any other conversation? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
I'm sorry, who seconded
Rob.
that?
Rob,
Thank you. I didn't hear you.
Tina?
what are we voting on? The minutes? Yeah, aye.
Tara?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And Brian's an aye.
Hey, we're almost done.
Oh,
We started.
I just got a text that someone was on the line.
We tweaked the time.
Did somebody said that they're on the line?
Yeah, they were.
We didn't start.
They want to try calling?
Yeah, I never called back.
So we're pretty close to telling Dan what time to be on, right?
That's fine.
Can I tell him 6:30?
It said 7:50.
No, it said 7:50.
We changed
No, but-
the time.
Yeah, but when he asked, no, because I thought he was going to be like 50 minutes.
Oh,
Based on the agenda, it says
is it more?
No, it was Dan.
Jill. So I have someone, Jill and Janine were both on the phone and didn't get called.
January's meeting. Michelle,
What's that?
January's meetings, it says 121. I think it's 120 on the bottom of the,
I just refreshed the.
Oh, I don't have it on my
haven't seen anybody,
minutes.
but if they.
okay. It's on the bottom of
Are they
the,
seeing it on right now?
it's on the bottom of the minutes. It's
What's that?
121.
Are they on right now?
I don't know.
We'll try in a second.
I just got two emails. Janine and Jill, are you on now?
It should be the
Hold on,
20th. It should be.
Janine says
Wednesday is
yes.
the 20th.
Hold tight for a second.
Okay.
I was just entering them in the computer.
Yeah,
so-
no, I'll take care of it.
You entered no digit. Please re-enter your access.
It's Steve. It's gonna come out of that.
This, I think so.
So we do have community input?
What's that?
We do have community input?
Yeah, I
Well,
just
we're
got two
trying to find out.
I got 2 messages that people were on the line, but they didn't get, it didn't pick up. So I don't know. Technology.
Let me start.
phone's
It's
ringing.
not picking up that I'm on.
Okay. Have my fall tea.
Right, drop the internet.
You allowed to wear those at school, Rob?
Yeah, I bought 4 of them.
They told us we couldn't wear them in our school.
Yeah, a lot of places like starting to say
Yeah.
they don't do anything.
They're not thick enough.
Yeah.
The droplets get through them.
It's like he's gonna rob a bank.
When we first started wearing a mask, I had to stop into a bank. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna get shot.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, if I did this a year ago,
The
Right.
guy,
First month or so, I was walking around with a bandana tied around my
Jason, is it a
Yeah.
neck. Old West.
You have 3? Okay.
I can good start with caller 7 if you guys want.
We're gonna start with.
Caller 7 should be on that.
Good evening.
hello?
you gotta do it like the radio, Brad.
Caller, you're on.
Here, I'll try.
Is
I'll try the next one.
Is the volume up?
Jill says she's on, but you can't hear me.
Did she hear me?
Work with has a gray mask. He looks like Hannibal Lecter. Every time he talks, it sucks into my ears. That's a 3D mask.
Try
Isn't
color
it?
8.
One of the 3D ones. Yeah.
Hello?
Good
Can you
evening.
hear me?
I can. Hi, if you can just state your name and address, please. Can you hear me?
Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, great. Can you just state your name and address, please?
Okay. Yes. It's very confusing because the video that I'm watching of you is at a different sound point than what I'm hearing through the phone.
Yep, so I would suggest, just like they
yeah,
say,
this
just
is-
like they say on talk radio, turn down your TV or your radio.
Yes, exactly. This is Janine Hinkle, 43 Tanager Way. I'm also a first grade teacher in GMS.
Okay.
Okay, sorry if that sound was weird again. I wanted to make some comments both as a teacher and a parent and respond to a few of the things that were mentioned in the meeting tonight that I've been watching. We had our first graders come in today and they were awesome and adorable and it was so good to be with the kids again and they're perfect in every way. But it was not a perfect day by any means in terms of saying like, oh yeah, all the kids are wearing their masks, they're all keeping appropriate distance. It doesn't necessarily happen with the little ages. And so what I saw was kids who came with masks that were much too big for them, that were falling off. We were trying to, tie them up, see what we could do to try to keep their masks on their face. We saw kids taking off their mask whenever their nose got itchy or they're trying to talk to their friend in line and they can't understand this through the mask, so they just take the mask off and talk. I just want parents to kind of have a realistic picture that it's not necessarily accurate to say that they are always masked when they're less than 6 feet apart. That is no sort of decision or disobedience from the kids' part. They're 5 and 6 years old. They're acting completely age appropriate. And it'll take training and practice with us teaching them, but that's going to take several weeks. The 6 feet apart that we talked about at GMS, that 6 feet apart is from the center of their chair to the center of their chair. So if a kid is sitting completely still and not leaning one way or the other, they might be just barely 6 feet apart. But if they slide their chair, if they lean one way, they're definitely less than 6 feet. So it's not a foolproof kind of line. The kids definitely impulsively got up and walked across the room or just walked over to someone. I had twice today in our 3 hours, I had a little one just charge at me with a hug, because that's what happens when you are 6 years old or 5 years old and away from mom in a strange place. And that's just how it is with the little ones that are impulsive. The tech tools, in terms of getting our remote learners access to our classroom, as far as I heard as recently as this morning, none of the grade level teams have been able to figure out how to make this work at GMS yet. We have spent hours and hours and hours. We can project something that our remote learners can see, that our in-class kids can see, but we run into sound issues. When we're projecting something, the laptops have to be wired in at a certain spot in the room, and sometimes that's all the way across the room from where the teacher's teaching in the front. We can't necessarily see the teacher or see the board and project something. We have sound issues. Because that computer is on the other side of the room, if a kid just drums his fingers near the computer, the remote learners can't hear anything that the teacher's saying. We tested it out. We had all the teams have had mock students in a different room with teachers down the hall trying to test this out, and we have not yet found a solution, even with the help of our administration. We're still working on it. We are problem solvers. We want to make this work, but I definitely have hesitation and concerns about the model for the remote learners. I also have concerns about the model for the remote learners as a parent, and my LMS remoters are hesitant and reluctant about having a day of 7 live meet appointments where they're going to be maybe up on the screen with all their peers looking at them on the screen, and they're these outsiders from out there. I think that if adults had a schedule of 7 Zoom appointments to get to during the day, that would seem very exhausting and intimidating. And I'm going to see how it goes for them, but I'm concerned about that, especially when the 15-minute presentation to tell us about it had technical issues for the remote learners who were trying to access it. It doesn't bode well.
Janine, I'm gonna have to
you mentioned the.
Janine, I'm gonna have to just have you hurry up because there are other people that want to talk, and you've been on for quite a while.
I'm concerned that Jason is not aware of any of these
I'm gonna
things.
suggest
We'll let him.
if you did talk to your admin, I would just suggest that I would probably reach out to IT, and they could probably help resolve your.
We do have some tickets, but it wasn't nobody.
Okay. We talked about those Humidity Shields that you saw. Erin was a fantastic model. We call it her beehive suit. And it's just not the golden solution that we would have liked to have been, because when you wear it, it immediately fogs up. And so the kids really still can't see her very well. She had drops of water running down the inside of that mask during the day because of all the condensation from her breath. So I think that that's going to still need some problem solving to kind of figure out how to make that work better. So I just think parents need to have a realistic understanding that it is not all worked out yet, and there are still definitely challenges, and it's not all, perfectly 6 feet apart with masks at appropriate times. And I think there's still just a lot we need to work through.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for your comments, and I'll just add that I can almost assume that the parents of Litchfield realized that day one was not going to go perfect. So, but thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
How do we get to the next one?
We'll try 7 again.
Good. Good evening. Number 7, are you on? There we go.
You guys able to hear me okay?
I can. If you could just state your name and address, please.
Certainly can. My name is Jamie Watt. My address is 19 Pilgrim Drive.
Good evening.
So as a parent of both a student at LMS as well as Campbell, and several which have already graduated with the system over the years, I have a couple questions, both with respect to what's been said to this point, as well as what was just noted a moment ago. So the first question that I had was, may I presume that the comments that were made probably about 15 minutes back are the closest we're going to get to a formal acknowledgement of the note that was read at the onset of the meeting?
Okay. So community input is just for that. It's for community input. It's not for asking questions, but I mean, you can ask the question, but we're not necessarily going to answer it. So,
Okay. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean in response to the question I just asked, but
yeah.
I'll move on to the second question. So you've asked for patience, and I think we're all trying to work toward that, obviously, both as teachers and as students and as parents. The question I would ask is there a timeline that can be presented to the parents as well as the teachers and the students for where issues present themselves? We're able to basically gauge that against the progress that's been made. One note that was made earlier on was, when we saw the remote model kicking in March, it was certainly nowhere on day one where it was at day 30, which is absolutely true. It was significantly better once we got data. However, we're now kind of in a split mode, right? So we've got children that are learning one way, children that are learning another, and I don't think we've got a set of etiquette or practice that has really been nailed down for any of the participants in the model to this point. So we're still kind of feeling our way through from every role within this model, right? So my question is, do we have a goal to provide a timeline as well as milestones to everyone involved in this process? Are we aiming towards that, or are we kind of just reacting and moving through this as reflexively as we can?
Again, I can't answer that question right now, but it's something that I'm certain if you talk to the principals at whatever school your child attends, they could probably help you out with that.
Okay, and the reason why I ask it here is because it's an overarching theme across the schools. We can certainly talk individually, but I feel as though we're not really getting a response to the question of whether or not there is actually a plan with milestones and or goals that would actually help to level set what the parents are experiencing. There was a comment that was made earlier about the back and forth on Facebook, and I think we've seen in other private groups as well. It would go a long way to control that if we're able to understand what metric things should be measured against.
All right. Thank you.
That's all.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
And then caller 9, the last one I have on.
Good evening. Caller, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. If you could just
Okay.
state your name and
So
address.
I'm-
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sure. So this is Jillian Osmore. I'm at 34 Page Road. I'm calling to actually provide some additional detail to the conversation about having a flexible schedule where kids are able to come in some periods or some classes and not others. So I thought that the explanation given by Mike Japp was pretty simple and didn't really include some of the more complex cases. I'm one of those parents who actually made that formal request. I have a daughter who has learning disabilities and IEP and gets parent services, but only for subclasses. So while we prefer to have her remote because she doesn't, we feel it's a healthier, safer choice, there are certain things and services that need to be provided in person. And so I think that the school board needs to recognize that. And also as a remote parent, can you hear me?
I can. It's just a lot of feedback.
Okay. So I would say also as a remote parent, I'm concerned because although yes, she has a shared para, this para is supposed to, she has dyslexia and writing issues, is supposed to read all of her tests to her and really provide a lot of one-on-one kind of support for assignments and work. How is that going to be delivered in a remote environment when a para has 7 students, some of them who are in person and some of whom are remote? And I've asked that question, haven't gotten an answer. And then I'm exploring more different avenues and do have some meetings scheduled. But I think it's important that the school board, when you're asked to make a decision, is also aware that there are kids who for some classes need to be in person. And that making that type of decision and not having all the information or not presenting all the information really is a disservice to some of these kids. And I will say, I still don't know what my child is doing for next week because we had a plan, which was vetoed. So the school made a plan, her special education person made a plan, and it was vetoed. So now I don't have a plan. I don't even know what she's doing next week. So while I get it, if you don't want kids going back and forth, I think it's important that these hard lines that we're trying to draw not be done, and that we really think about the kids and the impact. Because I think it's also important to remember that if we didn't have kids that were remote, you wouldn't have full 5-day-week kids in school. So I think it's important that when those remote kids need some more support because of issues that they may have, that they actually are able to get it. And that's my comment on it.
Well, thank you very much. And have a good evening.
And that's all we have.
And that will end community input.
Hello?
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 Hi.
Hi, this is Josh Forhart, 141 Talent Road.
Okay. Go ahead, Josh.
As a parent of 2 children at GMS, as well as a business executive working with both remote and with in-person teams across the country and the world, it is obvious that the board is not equally representing both the students that will be in person as well as the students that are remote. It takes work to create a remote environment that works for all involved equally and equitably in a way that is constructive for those that are remote and those that are in person. Listening to both the comments made at the beginning of the board meeting with many of the board members on their phones, texting or doing other activities and not paying attention to that content. And when it is brought up multiple times through the conversations, dismissing the work and the conversation and the comments made about remote learners, it is very obvious that this school board is not interested in providing equal opportunity for both the remote learners and for those in person. I am very disappointed in the conversation and the lack of attention to providing that remote environment that will enable all students in Litchfield to be successful and to succeed. Every parent is making choices. They're making choices based on their individual circumstances. Those circumstances are not equal among everyone. Those circumstances cannot be judged by anyone. I feel that this board is not understanding those circumstances or providing the necessary resources for our children to be successful. In meeting with both of the teachers at GMS, neither teacher felt that they had the capability, the instruction in technology to be able to provide and know how the technological solution was going to work in those classrooms. They both indicated that they had tried some things. Tried some things is not the recipe for success for remote learning. I would ask the board to please consider how you are going to support the remote learners more effectively so that we can have one community, not 2, moving forward. I know that you are going with the best intentions, and I ask for your support to consider the remote students as much as you are considering the in-person students, because we are one community. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Muted. Unmuted.
I didn't even see him on that.
All right. Are we done now?
Maybe.
Well, there's no one else on the line, right?
I'll restart this again and see if
Right. Just double check. So that'll close community input. Which will now bring us to reports, principal reports. We have GMS. Dan's still awake and with us.
There he is.
Hey, Dan.
Hello.
Good evening.
So found out a few weeks ago that GMS was up first in September for the board report. So luckily enough, actually, we had a report ready. I believe it was supposed to go the last board meeting in March, which didn't happen. And so we had that report ready, and in looking at it, it was actually, I think, even more appropriate for this time, because as we receive our students back after a stretch of remote learning, I think first and foremost in all of our minds at GMS is the social emotional well-being and just kind of where these students are at. And so Scott and Jocelyn have actually put this together with the support of Marie and Maura, and we've also now brought on Jen Hayes. So for this presentation, I'm actually going to hand it over to them to present to you this evening. But I would put out an open call to all board members. If there is something that you're interested in, something that you want to know about at GMS that could help guide me to make these presentations more meaningful for you and for the community, please feel free to give those ideas to Mike, and I can make sure that we can guide our future presentations in the upcoming months towards those kind of wishes. So with that, I'm going to actually share my screen and turn off my camera, and I'm going to hand it over to Maura, Marie, and Jen.
Thank you. So as Dan said, we had been planning this last spring. And so we had sort of the foundation and our most sincere thanks to Marie and Jen, who took kind of the skeleton and outline and really went with it so that we could move forward and present this evening. So on the next slide, for background information, GMS has long been implementing SEL strategies, and that precedes any of us that were working on this for this presentation tonight, because we have a lot of staff members who are trained for Learn About Responsive Classroom and are really good about using morning meeting with students, and that's been going on for a number of years.
So Dan, I'm actually going to ask you to go back a little bit. We have a little bit more information. Thanks. So really the foundation for our SEL programming is the CASEL information. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And it's really the premier source for evidence-based knowledge on SEL. And CASEL's identified 5 core competencies. These can really be just thought of in layman's terms as life skills or soft skills. And those competencies are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And 2 decades of research have shown us that individuals who have received SEL interventions have better academic performance, they have decreased behavior issues, and better mental health outcomes. And that really extends beyond the school age years into positive outcomes in adulthood. And so those SEL competencies are really critically important for long-term success. And conversely, we also have to think about the ACE study when we talk about SEL strategies. And the ACE study is the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, and it's one of the largest investigations of childhood challenges and later life outcomes. And the ACE study measured various childhood experiences ranging from parental divorce to child abuse and neglect. And findings showed that almost 2/3 of the study participants reported at least 1 ACE, and more than 20% reported 3 or more. And what they also found in that study was that the more ACEs that children experience, the higher risk level for adverse outcomes later in life. Anything from poor mental health, physical health, drug and alcohol abuse, lots of different really negative outcomes. But the good news is that students that receive SEL interventions and have caring adults that are taking an interest in them can kind of counteract some of that negative trauma that's experienced at a young age.
And kind of piggying back on what Jen has been talking about, we have had a resiliency task force that works kind of district-wide, where we've explored these things. We'll get into, I think, some topics a little bit further in of who had kind of present and around. But these are all reasons for why SEL is really important. Somebody who has a high ACE number, has some significant trauma, is going to benefit obviously from using social emotional learning, but so isn't your typical student. So making sure that, we reach everyone, and that we have ability to kind of help everyone through whatever they might be experiencing. And this is going to be extremely important with our remote learners right now. So I know there's been a lot of conversation tonight about supporting the remote learners, and Jen and I have every bit of the expectation to provide social interactions for remote learners remotely, and making sure that they're included in outreach and, again, social experiences and things of that sort. So it'll be really important, and we'll have information coming through. But this is about connection right now. Let's get back in and reconnect with everybody, including those remote learners, and create a community. This is just a simple graphic that I think really sums up that there are many things that are going on in individuals' lives that they'll carry with them to school, that they may not be thinking about math homework, but they may be thinking about other things. And I think, what's really key is, regardless of what we're doing, we're going to be spending the time to either manage behaviors, or we're going to be spending the time proactively to put forth social emotional learning and relationships and other strategies in place to prevent the behavior. So either way you spend the time doing it, it's how we want to be, if we want to be proactive versus reactive.
So during the past few years, we've had a number of trainings offered both in the district as well as in the building. So Marie made reference to the district-wide resiliency task force that members of all three schools have been a part of, and Devin has been sort of organizing and overseeing that during the last 3 years. At GMS, we have a building-wide support committee, a behavior support committee, and we've put a number of kind of positive reinforcement practices into place. We've had a number of guest speakers during the last few years, as listed here: Cassie Yackley, Melissa Saden, Justice Broderick, and Lynn Lyons. We've done book studies both in the building, and they've been offered across the district to different groups of staff members, teachers, parents, anyone that's looking to be a part of that. A couple of years ago, during the Professional Development Day, Marie and Jocelyn Robinson did how to flip a kid presentation. So that would not be flipping like the acrobatics, that would be like flipping mood-wise. So helping someone who's sort of stuck in a negative pattern or upset about something, and how to help them come around and calm down again. And then again, led oftentimes, Marie's been a part of it with Devin Banjoshki as well, professional development kind of things offered for parents. So, we try to make sure that we're extending whatever PD possible to our parents, because they're our first line of defense, and they work so closely with a number of students, and they need the same kind of training that, the rest of the staff members need.
And when we talk about assessing student needs so that we really can target our programming in the most effective way, one thing that GMS has been doing for the past, this will be the 3rd year, is they've implemented the DESA screening, and that's the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment. And teachers complete this every year with each student. It's done 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. And it's just a quick screener that assesses the students on each of those 5 core CASEL competencies that we discussed earlier. And then the students are rated as either strong, typical, or in need. And it's just really important information for us so that we can then target our interventions towards either individual students or classrooms or small groups that maybe are in need of different help in different areas. And if we need more information than the mini DESA provides, we can do a more in-depth on a student if the team feels that that is useful.
And that's kind of where the next step, if you look at the chart, individual screenings and evaluations, that's where we would collect some more information. So we may have the teacher do the 72 question DESA and then take the information from there, provide interventions connected to it. We also have a very effective CAT team that meets and spends a lot of time talking about students, how to support students. I am regularly testing, administering checklists for students who are in the CAT process. So we're doing a lot of intervention kind of early on to see, okay, what are some of the needs and where can we help? And then, you know, it may result in a 504 process. I know that their GMS does have kind of a high caseload of 504s. I think it's in the 50s. And then obviously, if we go even more specialized, then we're, you know, at the IEP process. And, you know, we do a lot of work with individual students and trying to provide the best interventions possible for them. When things come up, and we have, say, like a behavioral spike or you know, a student who may be showing just changes or differences in their behavior, we can use information and gather lots of information to figure out how to best support that student. So somebody who kind of emerges that way might go through this process. So you know, there might be a CAT meeting and then they decide to do a little bit more of the DESA work with parent permission. Or maybe we're doing some checklists just to see what might be going on. Maybe even interventions with Jen or myself just to kind of check in. So lots of steps that are taken at GMS to support our kiddos.
So thinking about Tier 1 implementation of social emotional learning, this is kind of things that all students have access to. So within the classroom, some examples of that are morning meetings. Classroom teachers provide those, as well as kind of opportunities for students to regulate themselves. So whether it's having a structured movement break or a calming corner or calming activity area where kids can go if they need a few minutes to kind of regroup. Another example for Tier 1 is instruction by the school counselor. So that's based on the CASEL and ASCA standards. Monthly themes have been provided and will be provided that kids focus on when they have this in-class instruction. And there's also been some collaboration with our phys ed teacher on doing mindfulness and yoga kind of practices. School-wide activities, here's just a sample of them. Often the school counselor, and Jen has already set this up for this year, doing some kind of community building beginning of the year project where everyone can do something together. Often we've had an assembly, you know, we're not doing that this fall, but students are working to make some paper masks that display. Last year and the last couple of years, we've done Raise Praise. So with the help of the PTO, encouragement from the PTO, the students have been able to participate in acts of kindness and kind of keep track and share what they've done that way. Our student council members take on an assortment of projects, have done assemblies. Last year, they did a play for the school called Take a Stand. Our speech language pathologists and occupational therapists began last year doing some structured activities at recess time, giving kids the choice if they'd like to come and participate in some games where they have the opportunity to practice social skills, work on some problem solving skills with some adult support. And our occupational therapists also have a sensory pathway in one of the hallways. So students that maybe need to take a little break or out taking a walk have sort of something that they can do walking on a path in one of the hallways down by first grade. And then finally, considering social emotional standards and then students' developmental stages when we have office referrals or behavior management that needs to be done.
And then when we get to tier 2, those are really kiddos that maybe have been identified as having a need in a specific area. And really those interventions start at the classroom level, and the teachers at GMS are great at that. And they might provide problem solving, either with small groups or an individual, maybe some friendship issues that might help resolve, or peer conflicts. And that's really done at the classroom level. And then of course, if we have a class or a specific group of students that have maybe been flagged on the DESA as needing a specific topic, I'll go into a classroom or have some small groups and present on that and do some explicit teaching on that topic. And then of course, both Marie and I both run small groups and individual counseling lunch groups, usually at lunchtime. We'll have to rethink that a little bit this year due to the COVID restrictions, but that's in the works. And it's really lots of different topics: social skills, peer relationships, emotional regulation. Really, we look at what the students need. Another tier 2 intervention can be adult check-ins and check-outs, and that's just simply like it sounds: a student coming to a trusted adult in the building, building up that connection at the beginning and the end of the day, and really using that as a support for those students that need it. And we've also been really fortunate at GMS over the last several years to have a number of counseling interns, myself being a former intern at GMS, and that just allows us to increase our bandwidth and offer more support to more students.
And then lastly, you have tier 3, where you're going to get a little, much more specialized in kind of your supports. You're going to have the really specific individual counseling sessions. You're more than likely going to have IEP services that are spelled out for the kids for their supports. And it's going to range, from counseling and creating social stories to very specific behavior plans that are addressing maybe problematic behaviors that are seen throughout the school day. You might be, again, doing full evaluations on kiddos. You might even refer outside for evaluations if you feel like you haven't been able to gather enough information or really sort it all out. Maura does a great job really trying to individualize when discipline is needed and what that looks like, and involving people in the process and trying to figure out the best approach for the student. We brainstorm often, especially if there are repeat offenders and we need to kind of find another solution. Obviously, we're CPI trained, and that can help in de-escalation before anything physical gets to that point. We'll want to de-escalate first, and it's been really helpful to have some paraprofessionals trained in it. They're working with some of the hardest kiddos, so it's kind of like that first line defense. Obviously, there are related services and special educational services that can support our kiddos in tier 3. Sometimes we provide paraprofessional support even for kids who are not on an IEP per se, or maybe are in the process. So we might be proactive in our approach and have a paraprofessional who's in the classroom check in with a student, or implement something while a student is in the process of the special ed identification. And like I said, we can do outside services. Obviously, there's a district social worker who can become involved and support in that way. I know that there was a family support specialist who is from NAMI that we utilized this summer. And so it's just kind of staying connected to other people and outside supports as well.
So finally, next steps. So for us, we kind of talked about short and long term. So for now, for short term, obviously with being apart for so long, our focus is supporting our students who have been apart, bringing our community back together again. So we want to reconnect. We want our staff to reconnect. We want our students to reconnect. We want our staff and students to connect to each other as well. We want to find innovative ideas to connect with students who are remote. So that, as Marie said, was discussed tonight, and that is something that is on the forefront of our minds. And we want to provide resources for staff and students who are having trouble that we identify in this early part of the year. Marie, are you doing long term?
Yeah, I'm good. I think, we've taken some steps, just to piggyback off of Maura, we've taken some steps in terms of supporting our staff and faculty with a classroom, different themes, different resources to support the themes so that they have a starting point to implement some SEL. They're not going into it blind, and we can support them as much as we're capable of supporting them. But I think when we look at the long-term pieces, I think there are some important steps. We sat and we kind of talked about what do we want to see, kind of where have things been, and what seems to be logical for moving forward. So common language, sticking, if it's a curriculum, then, having the curriculum in place. I know Choose Love is the movement. Jocelyn Robinson did a little, pilot program with Choose Love last year. And there were, some positives and some negatives about it. We could create a curriculum if that's kind of where we want to go, but just trying to have some consistency, I think, is going to be really important. Common language, not blending various curricula, so that we just keep it as consistent and spread throughout the school as possible. And then obviously include teachers in the training on it. I think, we can always look at expanding tier 2 and tier 3 supports. I think GMS actually has a decent amount of tier 2 and tier 3 supports, and we do think outside the box often. So maybe that is something that could expand to other schools as well. And then we need to look at policies. Are our policies, especially discipline and how things are handled, are we considering SEL standards? Are we looking at kind of what's in the best interest of the students? So just thinking about those pieces. And that pretty much wraps us up. So I don't think there's any questions nor time for questions. So.
Well, thank you all very much.
Yeah, if I may, just before everybody jumps off, I want to thank everybody for jumping in tonight. Dan's first time driving this sort of presentation. So Dan, thank you for that. And also to Jen Hayes, who is our new counselor. The board approved her at some point in the last few months, but now you're meeting her. So this is a great opportunity
Welcome.
to say hi to Jen as she comes on board. So thank you to everybody for a good start of the year and for teeing us up with a great presentation right off the bat.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dan, do you want to just stay on? Brian had a question earlier about drop off, and actually more if you want to stay on too. How did drop off and pickup go today at GMS with half the students? And do you have anything you want to broadcast to parents out there who are paying attention, who can help us out in the next few days as we get into a new routine?
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying that we received every child that we were supposed to, and we sent every child home that we were supposed to.
Yeah.
So there's the plus. In terms, it went, it operated. It was definitely a learning experience because when you're developing a plan during the summer to address that issue, you're really kind of at the macro level, and then when it actually gets put in place, then you get down to the micro level, and you really kind of get to see all the intricacies and idiosyncrasies that have it. But the good news is that we have a very thoughtful and creative team. And so as it was going, a number of staff members were coming up with small little, like I said, micro suggestions to make it run smoother. and it's already going to be in place. Tomorrow, Kristen Sturrett, the art teacher, right off the bat said this would be easier if we had colored signs for the thing. So before she left today, she presented me 2 large colored signs on sticks that we're going to utilize for the colored parent drop-offs. There were some things like with the buses. So during bus drop-off, we had described it as when the bus arrives, we're going to empty the bus. We're actually going to hold the bus until the bus gets to the front of the line, and then it will empty. It still won't be a 15-minute wait. But what we did discover today was that one bus arrived towards the back of the line, and they emptied out there. And what that did was it actually made a backup, but there was a gap of nothing in front of them. So we're just going to make sure that the buses are all to the front of the line before they empty. So again, just little things like that. Communicating with the bus company, just making sure they're coming in where they're supposed to be, which is through the exit. So we learned a lot. It didn't go smooth, but parent drop-off and pickup never goes smooth day one. But I'm still feeling pretty confident in the plan. I don't know if Maura wants to add anything to that.
No, I thank you to the parents that were patient. So, in some cases it does take a little bit of time. It'll take a couple of weeks, but we will all get into a groove and a routine. So, we appreciate your patience in trying to follow the process and the times assigned as best that you can. It just makes it easier for all of us.
Great.
Excellent. Any other questions for Dan or Maura?
No.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a great night, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So that'll bring us to the BA report.
So we have, based on the completion of the DOE 25, tuition rates are there. You'll notice there's a slight decrease at all 3 buildings. That's going to be based on the fact that we spent last during the year across the same level of enrollment as expected. So the tuition rates did come down a bit at each school, where I think actually the high school is the highest this year, as opposed to where we usually see that at GMS. So that's here for board approval.
Isn't LMS much higher?
What's that?
LMS? I thought it was.
No, if you look down below, last year's rates are listed and you can compare them back up. So they've all gone down. LMS is down about 700, I think.
It was a couple of years ago. It seemed like, I thought the middle school was like quite a
It
bit.
was a year when it was up, and then it went back down. It fluctuates
Yep.
sometimes. Sometimes it's driven by enrollment too. So that might have been the years when
Oh,
the
I see.
middle school enrollment was up. Those
Yep.
classes have now moved out of there.
I'll make a motion to accept the 2020-2021 tuition rates for Litchfield as stated.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Tina?
Aye.
Tara?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And Brian's an aye. Brian made the motion and Tina second.
Thank you for that. I'd like to give a couple updates on some of the things that have been going on around the district. We've been having basically weekly meetings regarding the LMS canopy project and the ventilation work that's going on. As of this morning, I signed the contract with Viking Controls to come in and start their work on updating the control system, which they told us is about 3 generations behind an update. So this will be, instead of being a DOS-based system that no one can really understand, it'll be a cloud-based system that regardless of where Dave Ross is in the district, he can log in and see what's going on with the system. And he can actually use that with Viking Controls to assess the problem before someone gets called out on an emergency call.
This is at the high school only or both?
That's at the high school right now. There's an appointment tomorrow for Kirk Thibodeau from same gentleman from Viking Controls to meet Dave at LMS to see what we can do down there to get certain pieces of the system back up. The control system is completely, it doesn't do anything. It's a very manual school. A lot of the equipment is not going to be compatible necessarily with the new system as it goes in. Some of it is. So as they do that assessment, they'll provide us with another quote to get what we can back online down there. In terms of the canopy, we had a meeting this afternoon with the architect and with Solid Roots Construction. And we will be issuing a letter of intent to move forward with them. The budget numbers have come in The one piece that needs to be reviewed is they do have a calculation for overhead and expenses that needs to be added into their final numbers so we can see exactly where the budget is. We're right on target with where we expect it to be with the project. They will be on site either Friday or Tuesday, I believe, set up their fencing to section that area off. We met with Jeff from Solid Roots on site today to basically identify where they're going to store all their materials, and exactly went through it with Tom to see exactly how disruptive this was going to be. They're going to be sectioned off in between the two doors. There'll be a fence there. There will be a room for kids to walk and staff to walk in front of the section. There'll be room to move a truck up there if they need it. And they're gonna get going. So the contract, the official contract with the guaranteed maximum price will be completed by Monday, is what David Ely is letting us know. He's drafting that for us. So that one's moving forward very quickly. The final price for the GMS Electrical between Jolt Electric and Schneider Electric came in at, let's see, just over $58,000. So again, now that the checks were paid within this manifest to Jolt, he used Schneider as his subcontractor. As now that we've issued the check to Jolt, I can go ahead, provide information to Primex, and see if we can recoup some of that cost under property. So there's those things. Just see here. We've started work. I know we've spoken before about the relocation of the IT office. That'll be happening within the next week or so. Contract construction on that project. Jason, don't smile too big. He's not even listening. He's tired of us. So we'll be working on that.
Have you identified where that's going to go? You have
Room 141, C141 down the music hallway. Yep. So it'll be additional space
you
for
need
them.
more room.
Yeah. So if anyone who hasn't seen where they currently work, it's affectionately called the bowling alley.
It's from here to here. That's it. Yeah.
So this will give them more space. And me and Jason were talking before, they're excited about having an area where they can actually do some professional development with staff and some teaching with staff and be able to speak with them. So that'll be a really good improvement for them. We are, let's see, I think the ones I mentioned before, the walkway where we go in for the elections, that has been repaired. It looks really well. While they were on site, JM on the level did patch jobs around all the curbing at the high school. So that is repaired as well. So things are looking better. So we're moving a million miles an hour right now and getting ready for to get some budget stuff ready to send out to the administrators and get ready for our session with you guys in October. So those are the things I want to bring to your attention. Any questions, let me know.
Can you give an update on the ventilation? And I mean, looking at the reports, there were things that were identified to be before school opened, winter, and then long term. Has everything been done for the before school portion?
So
knowing that the MERV 13.
So the MERV 13 filters are back ordered. So I've termed them as the disinfectant wipes of when this thing first started. You can't get them easily. A&E Mechanical did all the measurements, made all the orders. So those will be on their way. I think that was approximately 3 weeks ago. They gave us 4 to 6 week lead time to get them in. So as soon as they're available, they'll be installed at all 3 buildings in all of the units that they need to be.
But in the meantime, all the filters have been changed.
They have been replaced with the MERV 8 filters that we had on hand. So they are clean. There are areas and sections of the system that have not been addressed for several years, it appears to be, but now everything is back online. Every exhaust fan that was determined to be not functioning correctly has been been corrected. They've been replaced or repaired. And we have 2 units that were down at the high school that were identified that had been unoperational for a couple of years. Those are now back online. The reason they were shut down in the first place is they could not correctly regulate temperature. So now that has been, the valve on that to regulate temperature is working, and they can, those units are operating.
Can I ask you what the protocol is? Windows open or windows closed?
There's no problem with opening windows. I
Okay.
think the thing that's come up is whether or not, especially knowing that our second summer is going to come up somewhere along the line here, and it does get hot in some of those rooms, especially the second floor CHS.
Right.
The question has come about use of fans. We're allowing to put the fans in the windows pointing out, so it's drawing air out of the rooms.
That's what we're doing in my district too.
Yeah. So
And
that'll
Residents Association, yeah.
hopefully keep it somewhat comfortable. Those pieces have been completed at all 3 buildings. So the initial repairs and everything we need to do. Now comes the control part. So the contract I signed this morning, I believe the price was just under $45,000 for the high school to update and repair the existing control system to bring it back to the way it was actually supposed to function.
So that was a winter thing. Was that a winter thing?
We're very much ahead right now because they'll be in within the next couple weeks to get that up and running.
But you're right. That was
Yeah.
identified.
That was the
identified
key.
as winter,
By
so-
winter.
Yep.
Okay.
Because
We
it
need to
was-
be able
For
to
the weather.
regulate temperature because if you get too much fresh air coming in and it's cold, now you're blowing out motors and you're
Right.
freezing coils, and they'd be chasing that. So the
I'm
big
just trying to
positive is
ask the
that
question about, people who are concerned about the report and was everything done that needed to be done beforehand. Obviously, we have disclosed the MERV 13s are on their way, but everything else has been done.
we have been very, very proactive in this. I think all this work, we were working with David Ely and Dick Henry pre-COVID. I'm very thankful now that they're on board because they are, in my mind, I've said this to Mike, they are a godsend. They are on top of this. They're sensitive to the fact that we're all really, really busy right now. So they will they'll call us up and be like, hey, do you want us to roll with that? Yes, we're paying them, and that's the intent, but they will go ahead and do it. And I see their passion for the work that they're doing on both projects and how well they work together. So it feels like they are vested and they're with us to see this through. So it's been a pleasure to work with them.
And if I may just address, because the MERV 13 filters is a lot of talk about those. So here's what we learned yesterday. I learned yesterday at the middle school, when the air is removed through a return, like those 2 in the ceiling, so it's removed up, right? That air never enters another classroom. So it doesn't have to pass through a MERV 13 filter, because the purpose of the MERV 13 would be to capture any droplets that were removed with that air. Okay. The only time you have to worry about the MERV 13 is if somehow that was mingling into another classroom space. And so because it's 100% going out and 100% coming in, there's not the necessity to have the MERV 13 installed. So it feels good to say we're putting the antivirus filter in, but it's all fresh air and there's really not the need to have it. And so we were like, oh, okay, that's helpful to hear. So the MERV 8s work okay in that sort of a scenario because they're catching pollen and other finer particles. So, but now I'll tell you something else I learned, and that is that we're hearing sort of the November cold and flu season. And I've never really thought about why is there a November cold and flu season, right? And this is what was explained to us. When the humidity level drops, which by the way, the Humidity Shield's fogging up on a rainy, humid day kind of makes some sense. I think they're going to be better tomorrow, I hope.
My glasses did the other day too. Same thing. Couldn't see a thing.
So when it's humid like that, the droplets actually get larger, and by being larger, they settle out more rapidly. Okay, so if there's virus on a droplet that's a larger droplet, it's going to precipitate to the ground. When you get into the drier seasons and it becomes less humid, the droplets stay in the air longer because they're finer and smaller. And that's why the cold and flu season kicks off with the drier season. And if you remember, they kept saying with the COVID, not as worried in the warmer climates, the more humid climates. So it really wasn't warmer, it was humidity. The point being, we were told, when they're saying brace yourself for a potential uptick in this because we get into cold and flu season, even your ventilation system is not going to help you at the point that it becomes less humid and the droplets linger longer. So that was an aha moment for me. Now, frankly, I'm not worried about November yet. I'm worried about
Just trying to get
next
through
week.
this month right now.
But I think that's really important for people to realize that, we can focus on the filter size, but that might not be the thing we really have to pay attention to. There's a lot of other factors going into the COVID and the spread. So are we going to fix the system? We've done it. Are we preparing for winter? We're on it. Are we putting in the filters we need to? We are. As soon as they come in, they're going to be installed. But there's a lot of other considerations that go beyond that.
Yeah. So Corey, I'm sure Dave Ross is the person to ask this question, but I don't know if you've had conversation with him. I would assume that right now that our system is probably running better than they have in years.
I would agree with that statement.
I would too.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that they identified, just certain, the heat exchangers in two of the buildings that don't have any filtering in them. So there was conversation about, when those things get opened up, when we bring in an HVAC company to clean those units out, what is it going to look like? It's not going to be pretty, because I would assume that the one, especially at LMS, has never been cleaned. And I think, was it the one at LMS that doesn't even have an access door on it?
Correct.
So you can't even get in it to change a filter. So when they put it in the building, they put it in there, no filters in it. So all that air that's going through it, whether it be external, internal, it's just flowing around in there, no filter system going back into the system and being exhausted. So it's not working, wasn't working correctly to begin with. It's been really, really eye-opening. I've heard since the day I got here that there were problems with the controls, and to see all this stuff and to hear Dick Henry talk about it and some of the people that he's assembled in this team, you learn a lot sitting with them, and they're on it. So I have a lot of faith in what they're doing.
Good.
One other project that Corey didn't mention, and just so the board knows, that we're also on top of the rekeying project.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I did mean to mention that.
In non-public, I'm going to share with the board, because there's a security aspect that I don't want to broadcast, but we're going to share with the board what the keying structure looks like. But I can tell you that all the exterior doors to our schools have been rekeyed. Of course, we're not issuing those keys to anybody, because this is how you get in an exterior door, right? And then we'll talk about the diagram structure that we have for rekeying both CHS and LMS. We're holding off on GMS because hopefully there's a different solution to rekeying GMS. But it's going along well, and it will, at the end of it, every door will be rekeyed. There will be a much simpler, much more secure keying structure in place. And all the locks will be Columbine locks. So a teacher can basically lock it with a single motion. That's what a Columbine lock is. You push a button, you flip a butterfly, and you can lock the door from inside. So it's very quick, very instantaneous. You don't have to open the door and fiddle with a key, and it'll be much, much more streamlined. And if I can just give a shout out to Michelle. So in the middle of everything else, she was really helpful with the keying process, color-coded maps, keeping track of key structures and so forth. So Michelle, thank you for that organization. It's taking the big idea and then getting it on paper. And when we met with the key guy, he looked at us and said, boy, I should have videotaped this meeting, because you could be a model to how other districts should be doing this. He did, right? He was like very impressed that we knew what we were doing and we had it all laid out. So
He was great. He did about a 25-minute presentation with us on how the system would be set up. And we were able to take it and run. And as Mike said, Michelle took it, and we've got a good thing.
Excellent.
Did the bus schedules too.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that.
Anything else for Corey? All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That'll bring us to bus routes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the buses relatively went well today. The trial runs were good because the bus drivers were able to see what made more sense for stops, and we made changes. Part of the problem, and I shouldn't call it a problem, it'll work itself out eventually, but some people are starting to change their minds, because they have different conditions. Their conditions change at home, or like maybe they have to go back to work or something like that. And so it's putting more kids on the bus at certain stops. So now I have to really look at it, because as we reach capacity on each bus, we have to push those kids over to another bus, because we can't just say no, right? So I'm trying to keep them to a point where they're very efficient. And I got those routes down to a 20 to 23 minute run so that keeps us in time. Of course, building in extra time for kids getting on sanitizing their hands, then getting their assigned seats. So there's little glitches, there's little problems. I will say, and I will own this, I've made a couple of mistakes leaving stops off. I dream bus stops now. I did go out and look at some stops today that people may have felt were unsafe or too long for their children to walk. And I have to say, I not only did I look at it on like Google Maps, I also drove it and kept the mileage. So they're all below, everything I looked at was well below a quarter of a mile walk. And the streets look pretty safe. There's no hidden areas. If I had seen an area like that, I would have immediately added another stop. But so we're working through it. I think by Wednesday we'll have all the changes in. I'm working on the rest of the changes now with the bus company. So please, I've been asking parents to be patient if you're listening. Everything hopefully will work out by Wednesday.
Excellent.
So then if you post new ones on the district site,
I'll put a date on them,
us
and I will let you know. Absolutely.
on Facebook? Okay.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now brings us to student handbooks. GMS, LMS.
So you have the, basically the GMS handbook. Make sure I've got this right.
They have all
Michelle.
three.
Yeah.
All three CHS draft.
But the high school is still draft.
It's
and
still a draft.
They need some time to finish getting it buttoned up.
And so does GMS.
A draft also.
There are things that are not finished in there, so I'm going to look those over the next couple of days.
So I think at this point, the old ones are still available online.
They are, and not too much has changed.
No, it's very little in the three of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, except for
LMS is like
some
nothing.
grading language, not very much has changed, and we would like to put, I had suggestions, but I was thinking about this anyway, putting some kind of pandemic, maybe put up an addendum in there for protocols, just for the 1 year. Hopefully we won't need it next year.
So I guess the presentation tonight really is for the board to look at those. If you have questions or comments, get those into Michelle and me. We'll get them to the schools, and our goal is by September 16th to get those approved and to post the new handbooks. So
Is the yellow part highlighted part you're going to be looking at? Like I was looking at.
I'm going to be looking at everything.
Okay, I put a note in one of them.
That's fine.
Okay.
Put notes anywhere you want.
you put it directly on the doc?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
That,
Yeah.
that would be a great way to do it. If you have a question,
Yeah.
flag it right in the
I'll
doc.
do
We
that
can
right
then
Yeah,
settle
Tara
this
has
out.
been doing that. She has, and so is Tina, actually. And which is very helpful because I can address them right away.
Michelle, can we get the new dress code posted in the
Before
meantime?
school starts.
Oh, yeah, well, isn't the policy on the website?
The
You want it
policy is,
somewhere
but I
else?
think if you,
just
like
highlight
the news at the bottom, if we
Yes.
just put, parents, here's the new dress code. I think that would be really helpful to sort of, because it is, it's actually, I think, better enhanced for the families. It's more
And the
clear.
principals put that in their next email too.
Yeah, I can ask that.
Oh,
That's
that's- yeah.
easily
I
done.
mean, it's so simplified now. It's
Call
like,
Put the little
action,
cartoon
call action
person
to
there.
it. Yeah.
The other thing, if you don't mind, just real quick, I know we're getting up there in time. And I think I mentioned this to Mike before, that fall notification we sent out to parents about the emergency preparedness for like Alice and stuff like that. Does the board want to include something about wearing masks and things like that? I mean, do we want to like emphasize it in there, in that emergency preparedness thing that we
I don't
sent
know,
to parents?
I think that point's getting across.
Think we're okay with that? Okay. Just wanted to make sure before I went ahead and did that.
Excellent. So bring us to sophomore and senior projects.
So I'm going to give a quick summary. I asked Principal Lonergan to share with us kind of the status. I'll forward this email to you, but I'll talk about sophomore projects quickly. So Shanna Zepan and Diane Angelini are the co-advisor for the sophomore projects. And basically, they've got about 75% of the students who have already been approved. They've been using online virtual meetings since last March to get students to where they are. Remember, sophomore project is really a service-based project. And the big change is that they're allowing students to do more of the service with their family. The idea that a student could go to somebody else's house to help out, not really ideal in a pandemic. So they've gotten a little bit more flexible relative to working with their families. And the other thing is that basically they have the 15-hour checkpoint and then a 30-hour report with a presentation with their advisor at the end. So
Oh, I didn't know about the checkpoint.
there is a 15-hour check report.
Oh, I
it
thought you
says.
said 50-hour.
Oh, one
So
five.
why is it more than senior project?
1-5.
Okay,
1-5.
gotcha.
Yep. So that is going along pretty well. And then Denise Freeman and Lynn Nagy are the two clearinghouse advisors for the senior project. They also have that ongoing. About 50% of the seniors currently are enrolled and in progress. The one big substantial change is that instead of 40 hours of time, it's been decreased down to 30. And that's really, again, in response to the difficulty students have getting out.
Is there any reason they didn't do 40 hours?
It was 40.
So they did a 25% decrease on senior projects. Any reason they didn't do a 25% on sophomore? Because I think that's 30, isn't it?
It is 30.
It is
so,
30.
yeah.
Substantial.
No, I'm not sure. That's a great question, Rob, because that one doesn't show a decrease in the time.
It's just
So-
not as intense anyway. I mean,
Well, but if
It's service oriented.
it's based on the age and the ability of the student. I'd even say in some instances, based on what I've seen for some senior projects, the community service can be a little more demanding because you're expected to, whereas the senior project can be something you're interested
And I
in.
think a lot of the sophomore projects end up being sports related. So they're there for the season anyway, so they easily get their hours in.
But there's no sport.
There's no sports or
Well,
limited
I-
sports.
Yeah, there are. Soccer.
I just asked that.
Yeah,
one.
that just started.
If we could look, I mean, if you're decreasing one, why not the other?
Well, I think because they opened up, I guess in the past.
'Cause they made it
weren't able to do
easier.
With family. So by opening it up to family, they felt that they could still hit the number of hours because it was more flexible, but.
I guess my only
I'll take
comment-
it back to you and
yeah.
ask that.
And
Rob.
just because you can bring up, I mean, Bill will know the ones because I think I've mentioned it before. Some of the senior projects I've seen and knowing what was put into them, they're pretty easy to get around too. So
Has there been progress made? I know we haven't really talked about senior projects in a while, but distinguishing between the sophomore project as a community-based project and the senior project as kind of a
Passion project.
passion project or a capstone or, what having to do with the field you're interested in or.
I'm sorry, the senior project?
Yeah.
So in looking at this, he's actually calling it a passion project.
Good.
And the point with the passion project is, and this is why they did the reduction of hours, is can they actually get out in the community and, obtain those hours? So,
Yeah.
they are holding on to it as the passion project though.
Okay, but it's not a service-based
It-
project.
See, that's why I'd argue it's harder for the sophomore
I agree.
because the senior project, if a kid wants to teach himself to golf, to play the violin, they can do that at home, but, helping an elderly grandparent mow a lawn, you're outside in the community more. I would just ask that at least it's brought up. Why one, not the other?
I'm gonna bring that back.
I would argue that in a pandemic, the community project is even more important. So I would argue not to increase it. I think that there are probably more opportunities to get involved. I mean, not physically there, but coming from a nonprofit perspective, the need is even greater during a pandemic.
But I wouldn't let my second son go to the food bank this time for his
A lot
sophomore
of parents
project.
feel the same way.
Yeah, like I would not
Right,
that's what
right.
my older son did. my younger son did something community-based in our neighborhood. But your kids were too old.
No, right.
I mean, it is good.
There are
that
always
it's-
alternatives.
I'll forward that email on so you can read it, and then I'll get an answer to time reduction.
Speaking of pandemic, coronavirus review.
Yeah, so one quick thing. I feel the need to go back to the plan that we have posted because we have the final approved plan, right? That is on our website. It's our school reopening plan. And there's just some things about it that have morphed over time. And I don't want to say they've changed or that we're not following the plan, but there are things that need to be refreshed in there because what I understand on September 2nd is not what I understood necessarily on August 5th when we adopted it. And there were other little things that weren't caught in that plan. For example, it still says that if we go hybrid, so if hybrid becomes a reality for us, we're taking Wild Wednesdays, they're in there. And I know the board said you didn't want to do that, but we never wrote that out of the plan. So what I'm going to propose is that I get together with the principals, we do one more edit to sort of bring it into, okay, exactly where we are. We want it to match and bring it back to the board for reapproval because I do think it's, I don't want somebody later holding it up and saying, wait a second here, page 42 says, and that's not where our understanding is, right? So.
Is this a time for me to ask? So I think there's confusion about remote learners and extracurriculars. So you're saying not one student at Campbell High School who's doing an indoor sport is remote? And that's why it's okay?
As of right now,
What if there was a remote learner,
then I think they shouldn't play sports.
an indoor sport, but they could play an outdoor sport or no sports at all?
I see difference from an indoor sport and outdoor sport because the student's not coming into the building.
Yeah.
Then are you saying they shouldn't do any co-curriculars?
That's just
if they're
my
in the
feeling.
school?
I mean, you can,
Inside the school, it sounds like, but they could join a Google Meet to do student council or something?
that's, I thought we talked about.
Yeah, there were a lot of people, I don't know, there's a lot of confusion, and maybe rewriting the plan is the way to address some of these concerns.
Well, and I think too, there's a difference between accessing your education, academics online and being a part of the school community. And that's the part that isn't happening for a lot of these kids. Like we made a decision that my student would be able to, because he did okay in the spring and things were going to be better than they were, that we were comfortable with keeping him home to do his learning at home. But he's still a part of that school community. He still wants to be a part of the robotics team. He still wants to be able to participate in events with his friends and groups of friends.
But playing the devil's advocate, some parents didn't think it was safe enough for their kids to go into school. That's
Yeah.
why they chose remote, but it's safe for them to go into some things, but not school.
So
I'm just playing the devil's
Right,
advocate.
right,
I
and
don't
I
want
have
to stir anything
No,
up.
I'm not getting angry.
Yeah.
I have a response to that. So I'm uncomfortable with my son going in and being exposed to possibly 300 to 400 kids in a day, right?
Mhm.
So I wasn't comfortable with that. So that's one of the reasons we chose remote. I'm okay sending him to a club that has 8 kids in it that are able to wear masks and be in the same room together and collaborate and work on things. That's okay with me. It's a smaller group of kids. He's not exposed to 400 kids over the course of a
But
full
those
day of
kids were
school.
exposed
There are
to
definitely
400
people
kids.
who chose remote but wanted the hybrid.
Yeah.
So
We don't have a hybrid.
Right. We
One
understand.
reason
no,
we
we
took
don't.
that right out
I
of the
said they
plan.
wanted a hybrid, but rather than choosing full in, they chose remote.
Yeah.
So those are I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people in that.
It's the
No, but the hybrid was never given as an offer.
Correct. That's irrelevant. What I'm saying is that the argument is that these kids wanted to be able to do some of these co-curriculars, and again, like to Tina's point, they feel more comfortable in smaller groups.
Yep.
Which the co-curriculars would provide.
But what if parents don't want extra kids coming into their cohort?
Well, they chose full in. They don't have control over the 20 other kids in the class. What's one more?
One
by
more.
the same
That's one more.
by the same logic of us not being able to, remote kids should stay off campus because you were afraid to be exposed to anybody. I'm saying that's not true for everybody. We all have different levels of comfort, right? So if you're okay with having your kid potentially be exposed to 300 to 400 students and staff members a day in school, then what does it matter who?
Why do
who
you
those
think it's
kids
300
are?
or 400 kids if they're in small cohorts? Like where are you getting
8th grade
300?
is all like they're going to be exposed to everybody.
80%.
It sounds like
80% of kids. So if you're okay with your kids being exposed to 300 kids at school,
My child better not be exposed to
and
300
teachers,
kids because that's why we're keeping the small cohorts and everybody's wearing a mask.
yeah,
But at the high school, when they mix, they go class A to class B to class C to class D, and you do all the contact tracing, you probably can trace everybody back to just about the whole population. It might be split by grade level to a degree.
Well, that's what
At
I'm
the same
thinking.
time, they're not having contact with that individual
No,
close up for a
10
period of
minutes
time.
without a
you need to
mask.
Be concerned with, correct.
right. Because again, even in Bedford, when they had the child in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
the question was, and so I'm doing this off the top of my head, but was everybody wearing a mask?
Yes.
The answer was yes. Was the sustained contact for greater than 15 minutes? That was a question.
Less than
And-
6 feet.
And less than 6 feet. And when the answers were that wasn't an issue, they didn't even have to shut the classroom down.
No, they just sent the student home.
That's
in
correct.
all
Because
4
they
cases.
were
Right.
doing the things that needed to be done. So
and all the same mask rules and physical distancing will be in effect for the co-curriculars as well.
correct.
and if we were to allow kids to come in for a class, which I understand we're not,
Yeah.
the same rules would apply there too.
But it's different.
But see, I don't think
It's-
we're saying we're not. I think the way I'm looking at it, I think Mike, whoever said it earlier, needs to get a handle on it. And if personally, I don't think
Revisit
it's
it in
us.
October, I
Mike
thought.
decides at the end of September, middle of October, whatever, that they can handle 5, 7, whatever kids in band or chorus or whatever. I mean, I think that's Mike's decision. I don't think that even needs to come to the school board.
I think it does because we have a plan in place. We voted on the plan, and the plan was remote learners and in-school learners. And now you're trying to intermingle.
I don't think that that necessarily needs to come to the board. We hired a superintendent to run and manage the district. It's not a policy change.
But I would also say like extracurriculars and co-curriculars, they're after school, they're small cohorts by themselves. I think anybody should be able to participate in those, indoor or outdoor. I mean, I think
You,
I think
I
it's-
can't, what did you,
it's something we offer.
what did you just, say that again?
I
I'm
say
sorry.
indoor or outdoor, if we're offering a co-curricular, extracurricular, if a remote or a home, it's a small cohort by definition, a soccer team or a robotics team. Anybody should be able to participate in that.
They are playing soccer, the remote kids.
No, I know. I'm just saying, I don't think it matters personally. I don't think it matters volleyball or soccer. If it's going to be a small cohort to begin with anyways, it'll be easy to track, I'd imagine. If we require, I'm assuming Josh will require the coaches to track who's at practices and games or whatever.
Are
So
they gonna wear masks during volleyball?
NHIA, the guidelines only call for when they're on the sidelines, not during the activity.
I saw at school playing soccer with masks on. The rec is playing soccer with masks on, aren't they?
No, they have to wear them out to the field. Massachusetts, you have to wear a
That's
mask.
what it was.
We did buy all the athletes nice royal blue ones with the Gopher Eagle ones. It's nice.
So I will, I'm going to come forward with the plan just one more time to make sure. And there's things, to be honest, this question isn't really answered in the plan, right? This is a question that
Wasn't
came up.
addressed either way.
And I think we probably ought to have an answer to it. So we'll try to get something in there and just have us take one more look at it. I would encourage board members, if you see things that in the plan, if you remember something in the plan that you want us to zero in on, please get it to me so that we can get it cleaned up.
For this update, will we have the finalized parent guidelines and teacher guidelines for those for
Yep.
remote
So,
learning?
so Mary took
hopefully?
Yeah.
those drafts that we had, they went to the staff provided us with feedback. So when we were asked about timelines and protocols, I mean, that hasn't even been communicated to families yet. right? So we need to get that communicated to families, but it has to be finalized. So we're getting there, but these are just all the little pieces that we need time to get in place.
So when we do receive it, will it be just highlighted the changes made?
You
Or
tell me,
crossed out?
if you want, I can do
It's just easy that way. I mean,
Yes.
then
the
Oh,
green
God, yes.
highlight of what we make adjustments on,
yeah,
so you don't
what
have to read the whole
whatever
thing.
you- whatever
Okay.
you cross out.
That would be very helpful.
Or you know what I'll do is that what do they call it? Suggesting mode, because it does the highlight, and then if the board agrees to it, we hit accept, and boom, it goes right into the document. So we'll do it in that format.
Yeah.
Is there any inclination to change some of the we acknowledge or the, we understand to wills and just a little more affirmative as it's the final plan and moving forward? I know it locks us into some things.
I asked
but-
about that in the wellness committee.
Yeah.
We could, that was a style choice that was made when the reports were coming in from the various committees. And two of them were written in that format and then the others weren't. So I flipped the others in, and sometimes it got a little awkward
Yeah.
to reword it. I'll admit that.
Yeah.
But I thought for a style thing, we wanted to be consistent. So, we could go back and take those out and update it with we will, or
Yeah. Wills would be good. I think it just instills more confidence that we actually have a plan. It's not just, yeah, we know we should
More
do
actionable.
that, but we may not,
Yep.
Yeah, more actionable.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the manifest. Any questions on the manifest? All right. That brings us to public input, community forum. Do we have anyone on the phone, Jason?
I'll go and I'll just restart again.
All right. Tina, did you receive anything?
I did. I received an email from Jamie Watt, who called in. He said, good evening. Actually, it's not to the board, but I can read it. While we had a number of people call in this evening, there was a complete absence of response to any questions which were asked. What is the proper forum, public and live, to ask questions and receive answers from the school board, even if we have to structure them into one document or form to have a collation of questions ready? That's again better than simply rejecting the expectation of an answer. Regards, Jamie Watt.
I can explain to Jamie, the community input is for exactly that, to give input, not for an answer and question and answer session, since we're unprepared to answer questions on the fly. If you do have questions, you could, again, I would start by sending them to your principal. And from there, hopefully you'll get the response. If not, then it can be escalated to the superintendent. And then from there, you can then direct it towards the school board.
There's nobody on, but I'm just gonna do unmute all. just in case.
Yeah.
Right.
The one about the phone? There were no phone.
What's that?
Any callers?
It doesn't say anybody.
No.
but it
Just
can
ask
be.
Brian.
Is everyone there?
I'll forward this one to
Nope.
you all.
All right. We will close public input because we are going to go into non-public RSA 91-A:311.
Muted. Unmuted.
There we go.
Excellent. All right.
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Rob?
Yep.
Tina?
Yep.
And yep. So we're non-public.
All right.
So it's 9:32.
What?
These are the most uncomfortable chairs.